Valyrian's wings tore at the sky. Each down beat a hammer blow that sent waves of hot wind washing over the field below. Smoke rose from the burning grasslands, thick and black, and beneath that smothering veil the kings of Westeros were waiting for him with steel and shields and banners stiff in the heat. Aegon Targaryen sat high in the black dread's saddle, armor blackened steel over Valyrian mail. His three-headed dragon worked in red over his breast. Through the narrow slit of his helm the world was distance and color. The blaze of golden roses, the storm of antlers, the harsh brown of the trident banners, the dull iron of the whoremen marching in tight squares. The smell of the wind stung his nose, burnt grass, hoarse sweat, and something sharper, like pitch. "They are too many," Visenya said in his ear, her voice edged in iron over the roar of wind. On Vhagar's back she flew to his right, a streak of bronze and green against the haze. Even dragons cannot burn the world at once. From the left, Meraxes wheeled, silver-white scales catching the sun. Rhaenys was laughing. He could not hear it over the wind, but he knew the shape of it. The bright curve of her mouth, the way her dark hair whipped around her face as she leaned into her dragon's speed, as if they were one creature. "They have come together," Rhaenys called across the gulf of air. Her voice carried on the wind, fleet and sure. "Perrin, Argilac, Mern, Torben of the Isles, look how they huddle. 6 crowns, 1 field. They fear you, brother." "No, they should," Visenya said, "and we should not be fools because of it." Below, the army of Westeros stood behind a low ridge earthworks had carved from the plain. The grass in front of their lines was already ablaze. A creeping wall of fire Aegon's vanguard had kindled with pitch-soaked arrows when the wind turned. It had been meant to keep the enemy from advancing and to choke them in smoke. Instead, the fire crawled back toward him as well, whipping and leaping with an unnatural ferocity. The wind dusted, changed, and sent the smoke sideways, shrouding the center of the host in murk. Valyrian rumbled beneath him, disturbed. Aegon felt it in his bones, the uneasy shudder. He reached forward, gloved hand resting just behind the dragon's neck spines, and felt the hot living scale from which the world could be remade. "Forward," he murmured in high Valyrian. "Dracarys, we break them today, and Westeros is won." He had dreamed of this field. In those dragon dreams he had seen the grass aflame and the sky blackened, seen kings burning like dry leaves in autumn. In every dream he had descended with his sisters at his side, and in every dream all the crowns of Westeros melted in the same fire, reshaped into one. The dreams had not shown him the scorpions. They were hidden until the dragons stooped to strike. Great torsion engines made of iron and oiled wood, dragged from city walls and postern gates, assembled on the field behind lines of shields. Aegon saw them only when the smoke parted for a heartbeat and a spear of iron flashed up at him, point glistening. No thicker than a man's forearm, yet faster than any arrow. "Down!" he barked, but dragons were already diving. Meraxes plunged first, Rhaenys whooping with exultation as the silver dragon opened her jaws to pour down a torrent of black-red flame. The fire fell onto oak and pine and men and banners, and where it touched, the world turned to screaming. Then the first bolt struck. He saw it as a dark streak cutting across the sky. It slammed into Meraxes' neck just behind the collarbone of her wings, and the great silver dragon jerked, her roar curdling into a strangled cough. Flames sputtered from her throat and died. Rhaenys flung out an arm, grasping at the saddle, but the second bolt hit Meraxes in the eye, punching through scale and bone and deep into the skull. The silver dragon spasmed once, wings folding reflexively, and plummeted. "No," Aegon said, but the word died inside his helm. There was no time even to scream. Meraxes and her rider fell like a star torn from the sky, vanishing into the cauldron of smoke and flame and tiny, frantic men below. Visenya cursed in Valyrian, words that cracked like whips. Vhagar banked sharply, flames spitting from her jaws as she raked the lines where bolts had flown from. The heat of her fire rose even to where Aegon flew, but the scorpions did not die in a breath. The men manning them had shields raised like shells and were scattered along the ridge, low silhouettes among the wagons, half seen. The wind shifted again. The wall of fire rolled back upon them. Updrafts of hot air buffeted Balerion, the smoke coiling around his muzzle, stinging his eyes. From somewhere in that boiling darkness, another volley of bolts flew. One grazed the Black Dread's wing, tearing a line of blackened scale and sending a spray of dark blood falling like rain. Another caught Vagar in the chest, snapping as it struck, but leaving behind a deep, gouting wound. The bronze-green dragon reeled, roaring in astonished fury. "Higher!" Visenya shouted. "Get above them! They cannot reach us!" A third bolt took Balerion in the belly. Aegon felt it, not as the impact of iron on scale, but as a sudden white clang through his soul, a note of pain so pure it stole his breath. Balerion convulsed, twisting in midair, wings beating wildly. For an instant, they hung lopsided over the inferno, the field beneath them a blur of chaos. Shattered banners, charging knights, such small, scurrying things. Then gravity seized them. The ground rushed up. Aegon's world became tumbling sky and fire, and the frantic thrashing of wings as the Black Dread struggled to climb. Balerion's roar shook his bones, full of rage and terror, a sound that had never held fear before. "Up!" Aegon hissed, commanding as king, pleading as man. "Up, fly!" He could feel the dragon's hurt like a shaft driven through his own body. The bolt had not pierced all the way. Balerion was too vast, too strong. But it had gone deep enough to lodge between ribs, to twist with every breath. Blood steamed from the wound, and the dragon's movements were clumsy, disordered. Another volley came, streaks of dark death rising through the smoke. One bolt passed so close Aegon could have reached out and brushed it. The wind of its passing tugged at his cloak. Vagar swooped in front of them, a great bronze shield of flesh and fury. Bolts shattered against her scales or bounced away, but one struck home in her wing joint. The dragon shrieked and lurched, losing altitude. Visenya snarled something vile and turned her down-tilted head to look at him. "Fall back!" she shouted. "We can break them," Aegon rasped. His throat was raw, full of smoke and dragon pain. "One pass." "We have had one," Visenya said, eyes like chips of blue ice through her helm. "Look." He looked. The field below was not the clean sweep of victory his dreams had promised. There were patches of charred earth, black and smoking where his dragon's fire had fallen. There were torn, shriveled forms that might once have been knights and lords. There were gaps in the lines, but the lines yet stood. Behind the burned ground, new shields had closed ranks, the banners of the Reach and the Rock and the Stormlands and the Riverlands side by side. At their center, raised on a wheeled dais of iron-crowned oak, stood a tall figure in gilded plate, set with antlers and lions both. Argilax's daughter had married Heron's son in defiance of his pride. Aegon had heard the rumors but dismissed them as petty politics. A crown of antlers and iron, a cloak half green, half crimson. At that figure's back, the sigil of a burning tower, and beside it, the golden rose. They had come together against him. Beyond them, further from the fire, other scorpions were being rolled into place. "You would die," Visenya said more quietly now. "You, me, Vagar, Balerion. Meraxes is gone." Balerion's labored breathing shuddered through Aegon. He could feel the dragon's strength bleeding out into the air in slow, steaming drops. He stared down at the kings who had come against him, at the crowns glinting through haze, at all the bright, fragile banners of the realm he had meant to make his own. He had dreamed of uniting them. He had not dreamed of dying here, broken on their steel, his line ending in smoke over a nameless field. "Retreat," Aegon said, barely hearing his own voice. The word tore him worse than any spear. "To Dragonstone. Now." Visenya did not hesitate. Vagar's remaining wing beat hard, dragging the wounded dragon higher, away from the rage of the spears. Balerion heaved beneath Aegon, forcing his bulk around with painful stubbornness. wings clawing at the air. Arrows chased them, slender pinpricks fast and furious, but they could not reach the heights dragons could. The scorpions loosed one last time, bolts falling short as the dragons climbed into clearer sky. Behind them, the field burned and shrieked and shuddered under the weight of half a realm. Ahead of them, across leagues of water, Dragonstone waited like a black claw raised from the sea. Aegon did not look back again. His hands were slick on the reins. He did not know if it was dragon blood or his own. Rhaenys never rose from the fire. Dragonstone was all smoke and stone and the slow thunder of the sea. It had been old when Valyria was young, a fortress grown rather than built. Towers that looked like dragons rearing, courtyards shaped like talons, halls where the very pillars seemed to twist and coil. In the great hall beneath the painted table, the candles burned low. Outside, the storm that had been building since their arrival broke against the walls with lashing rain and a wind that sounded like a beast clawing to get in. Aegon stood over the table and watched the painted realm tremble in the candlelight. He had smoothed this table himself, had traced each river and mountain based on the maps of maesters and hearsay and the visions of his own bald-headed dreamer. He had placed dragon figurines on key keeps and cities, his sisters carved tokens coming in from 3 sides, pinching the crowns. In his mind, it had all seemed so simple. Now half his figurines had been swept aside into a small wooden box, a grave of painted wood and carved bone. Visenya leaned over the table opposite him, stiff in her mail. She had not removed her armor since they landed. Her hair, the pale silver of their line, hung damp about her strong, sharp face. There was a cut along her jaw where a splinter of broken bolt had scored her. "You should sleep," she said. He could not remember the last time he had slept. He could recall closing his eyes in that brief lull above the sea, when smoke no longer filled his lungs, and the screams were a memory instead of a sound, and seeing Rhaenys fall again. He had opened them at once. "Later," he said. "Later is what you said when the Valyrian freehold cracked in half," Visenya said. "Later is what you said when the smoking sea boiled. Later, later." And then there were no more cities of our blood left, only this cold rock clinging to the edge of the world. Aegon's fingers dug into the smooth wood at the shores of Dorne. "Do you mean to speak to me as sister or as sworn sword today?" he asked without heat. "Both," she said. "And as the last of your council, Rhaenys?" She did not finish the sentence. The unspoken words hung between them like smoke. "She is not dead." The thought rose in him with stubborn violence. He had not seen her fall, not truly. He had seen Meraxes struck and plummeting, but the field had been chaos, a cauldron boiling with fire and steel and screaming. Dragons were hard to kill. Rhaenys was quick. There were rivers nearby, bogs, secret hollows. "She is gone," Visenya said quietly, as if he had spoken aloud. "We saw Meraxes fall. Even if our sister lived the fall, she would not have lived what came after. You know what men do to fallen dragon riders, Aegon?" "Men remember their fear," Aegon said. His throat closed on the words. "They remember what we did to Heron's scouts, to Argilicus fleets. They remember fire. They will remember what they have done to us. And it will make them bold," Visenya said. "We are 2 dragons now, 1 wounded, 1 host broken. They have 6 crowns and no love for dragons. That field has given them a story, and men can live a long time on stories." He stared at the painted aisle of faces. Tiny trees were etched there in green, each no bigger than a nail. "I will not die on their swords," he said. "Nor will this be the only song they sing of us. Our people did not cross half the world to be broken here and remembered as a failed raid." "None." "What would you do?" Visenya asked. The challenge was gentle, not barbed. Aegon lifted his gaze from the painted table and met his sister's eyes. Hers were pale, almost colorless, but they did not flinch from his. "Valyria sought dominion for its own sake," he said slowly. "Power piled atop power until the earth rose up and swallowed it. We fled that doom, I thought." He exhaled through his nose. a sharp sound that might have been a laugh if the hall had not been so empty. I thought I could build something cleaner from the ashes, a realm made with dragon fire but tempered with law. You still can, Visenya said, if you survive long enough. Aegon looked past her to the high black windows where rain rattled. Dragonstone's volcano heart beat somewhere below them, a slow, deep pulse of heat and pressure that seeped through the floors. There are rites, he said. Visenya stilled. Old rites, she said flatly. Forbidden, even in Valyria. No one is left to forbid them. Aegon. We are 2 dragons against 6 kingdoms, he said. Balerion is wounded. Vagar tires. Even if we could strike at each king in turn, they will learn as they did on the field. They will build more scorpions. They will set traps. They will poison the very earth if need be, and their numbers do not dwindle when ours do. Nah. You speak like a man who has given up the field, Visenya said. I speak like a man who has lost his wife and half his people to my own pride, he said, more sharply than he intended. I dreamed of dragons over this world since I could walk. I saw a city of towers made from melted swords. I saw all the banners bent toward one throne. I thought it meant my time, my life. Perhaps I was wrong. None. What did it show? Visenya asked, quietly now. She had never had his dragon dreams. She had envied them, he knew, even as she dismissed them aloud. Only a man with our face, Aegon said. A woman with Rhaenys' eyes, a boy with your sword hand. The dreams do not care for names, only for blood. Visenya's mouth tightened. So you would leave this to grandchildren we do not have, she asked. To children that may never be born if our lines end on some Westerosi hill. I would leave this to a man who has learned from his failures, Aegon said. If that must be me, if I must live until the world is ready to heed dragons, then so be it. Visenya studied him for a long moment. The rites you speak of, she said at last, were said to have kept the first dragon lords in their prime while lesser men withered. Ties between rider and dragon deeper than blood alone. Life shared. Breath shared. Pain shared. And strength, Aegon said. Do not forget strength. And death, Visenya added. If the dragon falls, the rider falls with it. If the rider's heart gives out, so does the dragon's. 2 lives bound together in a single thread. Snap that, and both fall. Aegon's hand drifted unconsciously to his breast, where beneath steel and leather his heart beat a steady rhythm. I will not yield this to the field at Harrenhal, he said, nor to Argilek's daughter and her gilded pet kings. When Westeros is ready, when its kings have grown tired of hall brawls and border raids and children burned for sport, there must be someone left who remembers what unity could be. A dragon, and a man with the will to ride him. None. Visenya's gaze flickered just once. And Rhaenys? She asked. We will find her again, Aegon said softly. In the fire, in the dreams, our line is not ended while any part of us yet flies. Silence swelled between them as loud as the storm. At last, Visenya exhaled. The rites require more than will, she said. Blood. Fire. A sacrifice to bridge what is separate. We have few enough people to spare, Aegon. No, then we will not offer them, Aegon said. Valyria bled cities. We are not Valyria. There are older powers in this rock. Let the stone itself drink. Let the island pay our price. Visenya's mouth curved, not quite into a smile. It was a hard, wry twist of lips. Sometimes I think you are the softest man I know, she said. And then you speak of carving your own soul apart for a nation that has never heard your name. They will, Aegon said simply. Visenya straightened, the lamplight shining on the planes of her face. Then let us go to the heart, she said. If I do this, I do it as your sister, not your sword. As your last kin. I will not watch you walk alone into that fire. You would bind yourself as well? He asked. "Someone must pull you back," she said, "or strike your head from your shoulders if the right twists you into something that is not my brother." She spoke it without tremor. Aegon looked at her and saw not the hard woman who had drilled him with sword and spear, but the girl who had led him through Dragonstone's underways with a candle stub and stolen sweet cakes, eyes glittering as she whispered of what could be carved from the world if they were bold. "Very well," he said. "Come then." They left the painted table to its flickering candles and went down. The passages into the bowels of Dragonstone were older than any Targaryen, carven tunnels that twisted ever downward, walls slick and warm with a sweat that was not water. Heat grew with every step, a deep, simmering breath that seemed to come from the stone itself. The air smelled of sulfur and something else, sharp and metallic. At the last, the passage opened into a vast cavern whose ceiling vanished into darkness. A red glow pulsed from below, where a lake of molten stone lapped at natural terraces of black basalt. Here the walls were etched with dragons. They coiled and reared and flew, scale upon scale picked out in lines of obsidian and old gold hammered into grooves worn by centuries of heat. In the glow of the lava they seemed to shift and writhe, their eyes catching light so they appeared to watch the intruders. Aegon felt them watching. He felt the island watching. Dragonstone had seen so many kings of fire come and go. It knew his kind as few places did. He walked to the edge of the lowest terrace, heat pushing at him with almost physical force. Sweat prickled beneath his armor. He removed his helm, letting the damp sea air that seeped even down here touch his face one last time. "Brother," Visenya said, "last chance to flee." He gave her a look. She snorted, hair clinging to her brow. "At least you are predictable," she said. Together, they sliced their palms, steel bright in the lava's glow. Their blood was dark, almost black, thick as it fell. It hissed when it struck the hot stone, curling into steam that smelled like salt and metal. Aegon spoke the words he had learned from cracked Valyrian scrolls, salvaged from a burned library in Volantis. Words that had made even the red priests of Aerolor blanch when they glanced at the sigils. The language curled in his mouth like smoke, older even than the tongue in which he spoke them. He called fire and blood and the bond between. He called the first dragons who had risen from the smoking sea, the first riders who had climbed their backs with nothing but rope and madness. He called all that was left of Valyria's arrogance and its brilliance, its cruelty and its beauty, and begged it for a different ending. The volcano answered. The molten lake shuddered. Red bright stone rose in bubbles that burst in showers of fire. Heat pressed against his skin like a hand and a fist. His blood steamed and twisted, rising into shapes that were almost wings, almost hands before they broke apart. Balerian's mind came into his light, the rush of the tide. The black dread lay in the caverns above, his great wounded body coiled in a hollow of obsidian and ash. Aegon had never seen through the dragon's eyes before, not like this. Suddenly he was seeing both the lava's glow and the cracked curve of the dragon's ribcage at once. He felt the ache of the bolt, lodged deep inside, a dark thorn in living stone. He felt the slow, sullen rage of a creature chained by pain. Brother, Aegon thought, or tried to. The concept of words was clumsy, like stuffing pebbles in a river and calling it a wall. Heat and shadow rolled over him. The dragon's being was vast, unfocused, full of simple, burning truths. Hunger, anger, the joy of flight, the sharp pleasure of meat, the iron taste of blood, and the softer sweetness of ash. There were memories too, impressions. The sky over old Valyria, red-tinged and full of other dragons. A mountain splitting open. A girl with hair like silver fire stroking his muzzle while all around them the air tasted of ending. Aegon waded into that greatness like a man walking into the sea. He felt himself dissolving at the edges, his fears and hopes thinning into the dragon's simple now. It would be easy to forget himself, to let his small human cares sink and vanish. He held tight to the memory of Rhaenys's laughter, to Visenya's steady grip crushing his shoulder when she taught him to parry, to the painted table and the maps of a realm that could yet be. Fire rose around him, inside him, a roar without sound. On the terrace above, Visenya gritted her teeth as the heat scorched her. She could see her brother's outline wavering within it, flickering like a candle's shadow. Her blood hissed beside his, threads of steam twisting together as if drawn by some unseen hand. Visenya did not close her eyes. If something came crawling out of that fire wearing Aegon's face but not his soul, she needed to see it clearly. The lava surged. A column of red-white stone leapt upward, too bright to look upon. In its heart, Aegon burned. His scream was not a human sound. It was the shriek of a dragon egg cracking, of a mountain breaking, of a city being swallowed by the sea. Visenya stepped closer, ignoring the way her boots smoked on the stone. Her exposed skin blistered. She smelled her own hair singeing. It did not matter. She had always known her road would lead into fire. It was the only road Targaryens had ever walked. She reached into the light and seized his wrist. Her flesh charred on contact. Her vision went white, then red, then deeper, to a place where color was meaningless. For a heartbeat there was nothing but heat, and the sense of falling through countless lives at once. Kings born and died, banners raised and torn, snow over fields where dragons had flown. She saw a boy with Targaryen eyes born in a smoky tower in some future city of steel. She saw a girl with hair like wildfire standing atop a pyramid of brick, staring out at a sea of slaves. She saw a dark-haired boy with a wolf's eyes standing at the edge of a wall of ice. She saw Aegon under all of them, always the same, always reaching for something that moved just out of reach. Then the visions tore past like sparks, and she was back in her blistering skin, holding onto a wrist that was both burning and cold. "Come back!" she snarled into the roar. "If you go wandering into your prophecies and leave me alone with this cold, crabbed rock, I'll choke the life from you myself, you arrogant bastard." Something laughed then, in the fire. It was a harsh sound, cracked and weary, but it was Aegon's laugh. It wrapped around her like a cloak. The column of lava sank slowly back into the lake. The light dimmed from white to red to sullen orange. Aegon knelt on the hot stone beside her, breathing hard. His skin should have been raw and blistered, but it was only flushed, as if from hard exertion. His hair clung damply to his brow. His eyes were changed. They were still violet, still the color of their line, but there was a depth in them now that had not been there before. When he looked at her, Visenya felt a weight, as if another gaze rested behind his. "Visenya," he said. "You took your time," she rasped. Her voice felt like it had been used to scream for hours. She realized her own hands were ruined, the palms blackened, skin cracked. Pain would come later. For now, there was only an odd numbness. "You held me," he said. His voice was hoarse, but there was wonder there. There were so many futures. I could have walked to any of them. But you dragged me back by the ear like a misbehaving boy." "Well," she said, and tried to smirk, though her lips were split. "Someone had to." He closed his burned hand over hers, gently, as if she were made of thin glass. The contact made her hiss, but she did not pull away. Behind his eyes, deep and immense, something watched her. Balerion. She felt the dragon's raw attention, the simple question of it. Pack. Not pack. With us. Against. With. Visenya said aloud, to dragon and brother both. Slowly, the Aeon deep regard softened, like a great beast settling its head against the ground. A flicker of red-gold light seemed to pulse under Aegon's skin before fading. "We are tied," Aegon said, almost in wonder. "I feel him. His heart beats in my chest. The bolt in his side." He winced, hand going briefly to his ribs. "Gods. We will need to remove it as if it were in mine. If he dies, you die," Visenya finished. "And perhaps the other way as well." Aegon nodded. His face was drawn, but for all the strain there was a steadiness in him Visenya had not seen before. "This buys you time," she said. "Not victory. Remember that." "Time," Aegon agreed. "Enough to learn from this failure, enough to wait until their crowns grow heavy. And what do we do until then?" Visenya asked. "Hide on this rock and teach the gulls to bow?" He smiled, a thin, tired thing that still held a spark. "We heal," he said. "We watch. We wait. We turn Dragonstone into more than a refuge. Let the kings squabble. When they call out for something stronger to hold them together than fear and old oaths, we will still be here. Nah, and da. And if they never call?" Visenya asked. Aegon's gaze drifted toward the lava, reflecting red in his eyes like banked coals. "They will," he said. "The world is changing. I saw the snow in my dreams, sister. I saw shadows moving in it. If they will not unify for me, they will unify for what comes behind me." "Nay, me?" A tremor passed through the stone underfoot, a slow, deep shudder that made the carved dragons on the walls seem to stretch and flex. Dragonstone had heard. Dragonstone remembered. Above, in the caverns nearer the surface, the black dread opened his enormous eyes and took a breath that shook ash from the ceiling. They did not announce their defeat to the world. Word of the battle spread nonetheless. Fishermen along Blackwater Bay spoke of seeing 3 dragons stooping from the sky, and only 2 returning. A dozen petty knights returned to their keeps with tales of kings standing shoulder to shoulder under fire and living. Maesters set quills to parchment and titled their accounts with names that would be argued over for generations. The Battle of the 6 Kings, the Burning Field, the day the dragons turn. The High King was crowned in Harrenhal, beneath towers that still bore scorch marks from Balerion's earlier foray. He styled himself Aerys the Unified, for he bore Argelaka's storm crown and Harren's iron circlet both, with a chain of golden roses at his throat and a cloak of green and crimson lions. He spoke proudly of the day they had driven the dragon riders from their shores. On Dragonstone, Aegon led him. He withdrew his ships, ordered his captains to avoid Westerosi vessels. Traders and smugglers still came, drawn by the island's need for food and cloth and iron. They brought stories with them. Aerys' taxes, high to pay for the field that had been half turned to ash. Stormlords muttering about Riverlord arrogance. Dornish princes insulting from afar, untouched by the battle, for their spears had not been present. Years rolled over the realm like waves. Aegon did not count them the way other men did. He felt them in the healing of Balerion's wound, in the way new fissures opened in Dragonstone's walls and others closed. He measured them in the slow graying of the hair of the men who came to him to trade and never knew that he remembered their grandfathers. Visenya did not take the ride as he had. Some part of the fire had touched her regardless. Her burns healed into ropey scars that did not fade, but she did not age like other women. Lines came slowly at the corners of her eyes, and silver threaded through her braid over decades, not years. Time took from her, but with reluctance. She trained the few remaining dragon keepers until they could address Balerion without trembling. Vhagar's wound mended enough that the bronze-green dragon flew again, though never as strongly, one wing beating with a stiffness that made her turn slower. The 2 dragons hunted far out over the sea, bringing back whales and leviathans, their bellies streaked with salt spray. Aegon watched and waited. He read. He listened to the gossip of sailors, to the hesitant whispers of the few refugees who came seeking his justice when the High King's men proved distant or corrupt. He listened to the waves batter the black cliffs and the slow grinding of stone in the volcano's heart. In troubled sleep, he saw glimpses of what might be. He saw the great harbor at Old Town clogged with strange ships flying banners he did not recognize. He saw a lion crowned in gold seated upon a jagged throne of melted blades. He saw snow falling on King's Landing. He did not know how he knew the city's name, but it came to him as sure as his own, and the red keep beneath that snow. He saw, again and again, a darkness in the north, shadows moving at the edge of firelight, eyes like cold stars, dead men walking. Always, when those dreams came, he woke to feel Balerian's heart pounding in his chest, great and strong and afraid of nothing, while his own heart stuttered like a man who had glimpsed his death. Not yet, he would murmur into the darkness, to dragon and fate alike. Not yet. Eventually, the summons came. It did not arrive on a silver platter or wrapped in silk. It came on the lips of a hard-bitten captain from Gulltown whose hands shook when he lit his pipe. "The Riverlands are burning," the man said. "The Storm King's grandson rose against them when Aerys's son tried to raise his taxes again. The Reachmen went one way, the Westermen another, and the Vale has shut its bloody gates. They say the High King's banner doesn't mean much when there's plunder to be had." "Me." Visenya snorted from her place by the hearth, where she was honing Dark Sister's edge. "It lasted longer than I thought," she said. "What did you expect, Aegon? Men whose grandfathers bled each other dry every spring, suddenly content to share crowns because one gilded fool shouted loud enough." "How bad?" Aegon asked, ignoring her jab. "Bad," the captain said. "The Trident's a line of fire. Harrenhal's near besieged. They say the king's men are pulling small folk into the castle and letting the fields burn. Might be the wolves of the north come knocking next, if they smell weakness." "Nah." Aegon nodded slowly. After the man left with his silver, Visenya watched Aegon in silence for a time. "You are stirring," she said at last. "I can feel it, like an old hound who smells a hare." "A realm at war is a realm that needs an end to war," Aegon said. "They may be more willing to listen now." "You will offer them fire as balm?" Visenya asked. "I will offer dragon fire as sword and shield both," he said. "And law hammered in the smithy of necessity." They wanted a king who would leave them to their petty rivalries. They will find that does not keep their fields from burning. When the first of them comes asking for a stronger hand, I will answer. Ow. Visenya rested Dark Sister's newly sharpened blade across her knees. "And if they do not come?" she asked. Aegon smiled faintly. "Then perhaps their grandchildren will," he said. "I have time." The first envoy arrived 2 years later, under a flag of truce that had never flown over Dragonstone before. He was a younger son of some riverlord whose name Aegon remembered as a boy in another man's stories, now only a title. The lad's armor was battered, his cloak singed, and his eyes haunted. "Your Grace," he said, bowing stiffly before the dragon-carved throne. He hesitated over the title, but Aegon let it pass. "Lord," Aegon prompted. "Sir Edmund Tully, Your Grace," the young man said. "Third son of Lord Tully of Riverrun, though there's not much river left unburned round our walls these days." Aegon inclined his head. The title of Lord would not be Sir Edmund's for some years yet, if ever. But knowing a man by his father's seat was a courtesy he could grant. "You have come a long way, Sir Edmund," he said. "Many leagues, through many lands that are not mine. Why?" Edmund's hands tightened on his helmet. He swallowed, Adam's apple bobbing. "Because the High King is besieged in his own hall," he said bluntly. "Because the Storm King's men have burned half the fields of the Trident and the Ironborn have taken the rest, and the Gardener men come only when there is something left to harvest. Because my father says what he swore to Aerys meant something, but the rest of them only remember what they swore to themselves." "Noy. Nah." He lifted his gaze, blue eyes meeting violet. "And because there is a story my grandfather's grandfather told," Edmund said slowly. "About a day when the sky turned black and fire rained down. About a man on a dragon's back who offered a different sort of rule. He said you were a monster. He said you were a threat. But when I look at my sisters hungry, and my father bleeding from a wound that will not heal, I think perhaps a monster who keeps the peace is better than a dozen squabbling men who do not." "Nah." Visenya, watching from the shadows of a pillar, smiled like a knife unsheathed. Aegon rose from his throne. "You would have me come again to your lands," he said, "with my dragons." Sir Edmund's jaw clenched. He nodded once. "I would, your grace. If you promise that when they have bent knee to you, you will not strip them bare. If you promise that your justice will fall on us as well as on our foes." "No." Aegon looked down at the painted table that had been moved to the center of the hall long ago and never left. He saw again the crowns he had set upon it in youth, thinking only of how to take them. Now, in his mind, he placed different things upon the map. The stories of burning villages, the faces of hungry girls, the weary set of Sir Edmund's mouth as he swallowed his pride. "When next I come," he said slowly, "it will not be to force all crowns onto one head simply because I can. It will be to forge something that can endure winters like the one I saw in my dreams." "No, winters?" Edmund asked, frowning. Aegon shook his head. "It matters little now. Sir Edmund, I will come if you are willing to do more than bend knee. Swear to me you will hold the Riverlands for a crown that belongs not to Hoare, nor Storm King, nor High King, but to a new line. Mine. One that will rule not by whim, but by law. I will ask the same of every lord who comes to me." He thought of the scorpions on the burning field. They will be given a chance to reconsider. Once. "No." Edmund swallowed again. "And if they still refuse?" Aegon looked him in the eye. "Then I will do what dragons were made to do," he said. "And the story they tell their children will be different from the one your grandfather heard." Edmund hesitated barely a breath. Then he knelt, resting his sword crosswise across his palms. "Then by the Seven and by the red waters of the Trident," he said, voice shaking but clear, "I swear my house and my sword to King Aegon Targaryen, as long as he keeps the peace he promises. If you fail, your grace, I will die trying to take your head." "No." Visenya's smile deepened. Aegon almost laughed. "Rise, Lord of Riverrun," he said instead. When Edmund Tully stood, he did so a little straighter. The second attempt was different from the first in all the ways that mattered. Aegon did not send ravens demanding submission and threatening fire. He sent letters offering treaties, tariffs in exchange for safe roads, mediation in exchange for oaths. The weight of dragonfire used to enforce peace, not to launch war. He did not begin with the strongest. He began with those most bruised by the chaos. Riverlords, petty kings of the Vale's mountain clans, village councils along the Blackwater who were tired of seeing every other year's harvest trampled by armies. He flew Balerion rarely at first, and only when he must. The sight of the black dread in the sky sent men into hiding and raised old fears. So he walked, sailed, rode on a common horse more often than not. Men who had once seen him only as a shadow in the clouds now sat across tables from him and argued about grain. Visenya said he was mad, and perhaps he was, but the realm was madder. Slowly, knot by knot, he began to bind threads. Riverrun bent first, as Edmund had sworn. Then a dozen lesser houses along the Trident whose names would be forgotten by history, but whose signatures on his charters mattered more than crowns. A handful of storm lords whose king had grown old and drunk and careless. Some of the Ironborn, never all, for they chafed under any leash and had salt in their bones instead of sense. The High King called him usurper and oathbreaker in every proclamation. He declared Aegon outlaw and ordered his capture on sight. "I'd like to see him try," Visenya said dryly, when the raven bearing that message arrived at Dragonstone. "Let him rage," Aegon replied. "Every word he spends spitting at me is a word not spent calming his own lords." He established courts in the places that accepted his authority. Men came to them with grievances. Some left satisfied, some grumbling, but all left with sentences they understood. Aegon listened to both peasants and lords. He hanged those of his own retainers who abused their power as readily as he hanged bandits. He was far from perfect. His temper flared. His dragon dreams distracted him. His foreign ways grated on Westerosi pride. But slowly, the story of him shifted in the crofts and keeps. Not monster. Not entirely. Eris, The unified died in his bed, choking on his own tongue. His successor burned half a village suspected of sheltering Aegon's envoys. When winter came late to the riverlands and food grew short, it was Aegon's granaries that opened first, his ships that brought grain from Essos. He did not win hearts. He won reluctance, calculation, weary acceptance. It would do. At last, when his power in the riverlands and along the eastern coast was too great to ignore, when the High King's line was fraying and uprisings rose and fell with every season, Aegon did what he had not done since that first disastrous day. He brought his dragons fully to war. He did not do it with joy. Valerian's wound still ached in him whenever the dragon beat his wings too hard, a dull stab in his own ribs. But there came a day when one of his envoys returned with his hands cut off, and the charred body of a Tully boy dragged behind a horse, sent as a message. The message was received. They met once more on a field of yellow grass, this time near the Red Fork of the Trident. The High King's grandson had taken the title now, though half his banners were missing. Still, what remained was formidable. Knights of the Reach in gleaming mail, stormlords with their warhammers, men of the Rock in heavy plate, their long shadows stretching across the field. Aegon did not make the mistake of stooping straight into their midst. He had studied the scorpions they would bring, how they must be crewed, how they must be placed. He had spent long nights with carpenters and smiths, learning how wood splintered and how iron bent. He came at them from afar. The day was overcast, the sky a uniform gray. When Balerion rose, the wind was with him. Aegon could feel the dragon's strength coiled under his legs, greater than it had been the day of their first battle. The bond between them had deepened into something like shared breath. They knew each other's intentions half-formed. Vhagar flew at his flank, Visenya grim and steady. Below them, their modest host waited behind trenches and sharpened stakes, the banners of their nascent realm fluttering. The three-headed dragon, the trout of Tully, the stag of a stormlord who had finally declared for them. The High King's men raised their shields, remembering. "We are not the same," Aegon thought, and leaned forward. They did not dive straight down. They swooped in long, slanting passes, fire trailing behind them in great sweeping arcs that caught the grass far from the enemy's scorpions. Smoke rose, thick and blinding. Not over the enemy lines, but between them, cutting the field into pockets where visibility was poor. Aegon burned the ground where he wanted them to move, not where they stood. He had his own scorpions now, small and few, but mounted on carts that his men dragged behind lines. He had archers trained to loose when the wind shifted, sending flights of flaming arrows where the enemy thought themselves safe. He had learned from Westeros even as he meant to rule it. And when their lines began to fray, when the High King's grandson shouted himself hoarse trying to regroup amidst the smoke, Aegon chose his moment. "Now," he murmured. Balerion folded his wings and dropped, not into the center of the army, but at its flank, where one of the scorpion batteries had been pulled hastily into position. The great beast hit the earth like a falling mountain, claws tearing gouges in the ground. His shadow swallowed the men scrambling to turn their engines, to reload. "Dracarys," Aegon said. Fire roared. The scorpions vanished in a heartbeat, melting into slag. Men became black shapes that toppled and crumbled as their flesh cooked from bones. The smell was indescribable. Aegon did not flinch. He had smelled it before. On the other side of the field, Vhagar's fire took a wedge out of the enemy's cavalry just as they began a charge. Horses screamed as they fell, riders thrown and crushed. Visenya banked sharply, bringing Vhagar's bulk between another set of scorpions and their line of sight. The High King's grandson rallied his men, to his credit. He tried to push through the fire, shouting that dragons were not gods, that they could be felled. Aegon did not answer with words. He answered with a second pass, crippling another scorpion, then a third. He did not waste fire on the mass of men where it would make only horror and no difference. He picked off the threats carefully, like a man removing daggers from an enemy's hands. By the time the smoke cleared enough for the two hosts to see one another again, the enemy's advantage in engines was gone. What remained was men. Men could be broken. They were. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, it shone on a field strewn with dead horses, shattered wagons, and men crawling away from the mess. The High King's grandson lay among them, his gilded crown dented, his face blackened by soot. Aegon stood over him, helm off, hair plastered to his brow with sweat and ash. "You could have ruled," the man coughed, spitting blood. "As my marshal, my dragon, we could have made you part of us." "I am not here to be part of you," Aegon said quietly. "I am here to make something new." He took the crown from the man's head. It felt heavy and cheap in his hand, gilt flaking, the antlers slightly bent. He turned it once, looking at the symbols of lions and roses worked into the band. "Take him, and any who yet breathe," Aegon called to his men. "Treat their wounds. The dead will have burial. The living will have a choice." He did not melt the crown. Not yet. In the years that followed, he carved from the wreckage of the old High King's realm something that could be called an empire, though he flinched from the term. He summoned lords to councils, and built roads and codified laws. Men who had once raided their neighbors every spring found their wrists snapped in iron bands if they tried it now. He was not gentle. Those who defied him, who clung to their little wars as children to toys, found dragons at their gates. But he was as fair with his own bannermen as with those who had once been enemies, and that fairness bought him a loyalty he had not expected. There were rebellions. There were assassination attempts, a few of which came close enough to leave scars on his skin. There was a rising of the faith that cost him hundreds of men and forced him to compromise on things that made his teeth grind. There were nights when he sat alone with his maps and thought that this was a conquest of parchment and patience, not of fire, and wondered if Valyria might have survived if it had learned such arts. He aged, but slowly. His hair remained silver, though lines deepened around his eyes. Visenya's braid went entirely white, her scarred hands stiffened, but she still held Dark Sister with unshaken grip. Kings who had faced him on the field grew old and died. Their sons inherited oaths their fathers had sworn for grudging reasons and found them less hateful than they had expected. Aegon's realm stretched from the wall to the Dornish sands, if not always firmly. He had children at last, though not with Rhaenys. He took other wives, made other alliances of blood. Sons and daughters with silver-gold hair and deep violet eyes ran through the halls of the Red Keep he built, atop Aegon's Hill in the new city that grew around his first fort at the Blackwater's mouth. He named it King's Landing, though he did not like the sound of it. It implied too much that the landing was the victory, not the years of toil after. For a time, it seemed he had done what he had set out to do. Then the dreams came again. They were colder now. He saw snow blowing hard across a field where no banners flew because they had all been torn and buried under ice. He saw dead men walking, their eyes pale and unblinking, their wounds still open. He saw a wall of ice taller than any tower, cracking under a force it had never been meant to meet. He woke with frost on his lashes in the middle of summer. Visenya found him staring north from the ramparts one such night, cloak drawn tight around his shoulders though the air was warm. "You see them again," she said. "Yes. And?" She leaned on the parapet, eyes half-hooded. Age had carved lines into her face as surely as Dark Sister carved into waked steel, but there was nothing weak about her. "We are not ready," he said. "We have peace, of a sort. We have roads, laws, an army loyal more to a crown than to any one banner. But we do not have belief." "In you?" she asked. "In what comes," he said. "They think winter is a hard season to be endured with extra grain and thicker cloaks. They do not know that winter can walk. You are better placed to teach them now than when you were shouting alone from a rock," Visenya said. "Call your lords. Show them what you have seen." "And if they do not believe me?" Aegon asked softly. "The first time I came, I asked them to kneel to prevent war. They refused. They had to see their fields burn before they understood. How do you show a man a threat that has not yet crossed his borders?" Visenya's gaze turned north as well. "You wait until it does," she said. He did. He sent more men to the wall, reinforcing the Night's Watch beyond any precedent. He stocked their larders and ordered the building of new towers along the Gift. He listened to the old tales men brought back from ranging, not dismissing them as folly. But in the south, lords grumbled about coins spent on a myth. They saw only a king growing old and strange, muttering about shadows in the snow. His children grew restless. They had been born into a unified Westeros and took it for granted. They saw conquest as a story told at feasts, not as the scar on their father's soul. Some of them began to scheme among themselves, thinking of succession, of how they might better wield his realm. Aegon watched them with a grief he could not voice. He loved them. He saw too how the old pattern tried to repeat. Dragon against dragon, brother against sister. "That is what we are," Visenya said once, watching two of his sons argue at a feast, their voices rising above the music. Fire trying to choose its shape. You cannot blame the flame for wanting to leap the hearth. Nay, Dishi. I can blame myself for not learning fast enough, Aegon said. He did not live to see the wall break. He died in his bed at Dragonstone, heart stopping after a night of fevered dreams, in which he saw Balerion fly above a wall of ice and breathe black fire that turned blue as it met the cold. He saw a boy with wolf's eyes plunged a sword of burning steel into snow that did not melt. He saw a girl with dragons on her shoulders standing in the ruins of a city made of melted swords. When he woke, his chest hurt. The ache that had been Balerion's old wound flared, and then there was nothing. For most men, that would have been the end. For Aegon, bound as he was to the black dread by blood and molten rock, death was a door half open. He stepped through and found on the other side that he still had eyes. They were not human. The dragon slept. That was Aegon's first impression, though time meant little. Balerion's mind was vast, mostly quiet. The dragon's memories and instincts folded around him like layers of hot rock. Somewhere, faint and far away, Aegon felt his own body cooling in its bed. The weeping of children, the rough voices of men lifting his corpse. He could not feel his heartbeat. He could feel Balerion's, slow and steady. We are not done, some stubborn part of him thought. The realm is fragile. My heirs squabble. The north sees more than the south, but the south holds the granaries. I cannot leave them like this. In the dragon's dreaming, seasons rose and fell like breaths. Balerion slept in the great cavern beneath Dragonstone, growing in slow increments even in slumber, scales thickening, wings like stretched sailcloth. Above, the world shifted. Aegon felt cities change shape, banners alter, languages shift. He felt the tremors when parts of his realm broke into rebellion, and the stronger tremors when those rebellions were put down. He sensed, distantly, the death of his children, then his grandchildren. He was not wholly gone from them. Some of them dreamed of him as a living man, not knowing they were touching the mind that still watched. Eventually, even dragons do not sleep easily. It began with cold. A tendril of something not fire crept into Balerion's dreams. It tasted of stone that had never known warmth and of wind that had never touched a living thing. It carried with it faint sounds, the crack of ice, the clatter of bones. Aegon felt it and recoiled. The dragon rumbled uneasily, stirring in his cavern. Rock dust sifted from the ceiling of the dragon motte. Not yet, Aegon thought, with a desperation that surprised him. Not while my house is squabbling itself to pieces. He reached for the bond that had once tied him to his own flesh. It was frayed, but not severed entirely. Blood called to blood. He found, through a haze of years, a boy of his line with hair the color of pale golden eyes like bruised violet, standing on a balcony of the Red Keep staring north. Listen, Aegon whispered. The boy? Daron? Damien. Names had blurred, shivered. He looked up, as if he had heard something. Then his mother called his name sharply, and he turned away. The cold crept further. Balerion woke fully with a roar that shook Dragonstone to its foundations. In King's Landing, still called that, though the king on its throne was several reigns removed from the first, men staggered as the earth trembled. In the north, at Winterfell, ravens stirred uneasily on their perches. Aegon surged upward through the dragon's mind like a man breaking the surface of the sea. Now, he thought, now or never. Balerion's eyes opened. They were a deep, molten red, the pupils thin slits. In them, faint but there, something like human awareness flickered. The black dread stretched, stone grinding against scale. Chains that had been placed on his limbs long ago by caretakers who feared his size snapped like rotten twine. He shook himself like a dog, sending dust and old bones flying. Above, the mouth of the Dragonmont blew out a plume of ash. On the walls of Dragonstone, a young woman in Targaryen red and black staggered, clutching at the parapet. She was of his blood, though far removed, her face unfamiliar but her eyes his own. "What?" she gasped, staring at the volcano as it belched smoke. Aegon reached for her with everything he had. The connection was weaker than those he had forged in life, but it was there, a thread of shared blood, music humming along it. He sent her not words, but images. Snow, a wall, eyes like ice, dragons burning blue. She paled, her lips moved. When she spoke to her maester that night, her voice shook with fear she tried to hide with anger. "We must send more men north," she said, "and messages to every lord. Tell them winter may bring more than cold." "Princess," the maester said gently, "the treasury." "Do it," she snapped. Somewhere far north, something laughed, a sound like cracking ice. It would not be enough, Aegon knew. Too little, too late. The patterns of men's minds did not change quickly, even over generations. They would deny, delay, disbelieve. If he could not wake them, he would wake himself. He turned inward, aligning his will with Balerion's instinct. Fly, he thought. The dragon did not need to be told twice. The black dread burst from the Dragonmont like an arrow from a bow, his vast wings scattering ash. Lava splashed in his wake, sending glowing stones tumbling down the mountainside. Men on the walls fell to their knees at the sight of him, some shrieking, some praying. He was bigger than any dragon had a right to be, bigger even than in Aegon's youth. Centuries of slumber had not withered him. They had consolidated him into something that was more a force of nature than beast. Aegon rode inside his mind, feeling each wing beat like a muscle's flex. They flew north. The sea passed beneath them in long gray sheets. The coast of the Vale, the Fingers, the stony shores of the north. Aegon saw them from a height that turned castles into toys. Balerion's shadow passed over fields where men looked up and dropped their tools, over villages where mothers clutched their children close and whispered old prayers. On the way to Winterfell, a flight of smaller dragons rose from a rookery near the capital, riders on their backs. They were his descendants, Aegon realized dimly, though their armor and faces were strange. They called to Balerion in High Valyrian, trying to curb him, to turn him back. Balerion ignored them. Aegon reached for them, brushing their minds with thoughts of command and plea both. Some flinched, their dragons stumbling in the air, almost falling from the sky. Others clung tight, teeth gritted, forcing their mounts to follow. By the time the wall rose into view, only one remained at his side. A lean red dragon, smaller than Balerion by far, but still large enough to blot out a barn, ridden by a young man with hair whipped wild by the wind. He looked back at Balerion with eyes full of awe and fear. "Who are you?" Aegon managed to project the concept more than the word. The answer came haltingly, as if across a gulf. Aenar, the boy thought, surprised. "Prince Aenar. And you're the reason you have dragons," Aegon thought dryly. Even in near death, his pride was not dead. The wall dominated the northern horizon. a colossal slab of ice that made even Balerion feel small. It glittered blue and white where the weak sun struck it, but in its depths, Aegon sensed other hues: gray, black, a colorless darkness like the absence of all things. On its top, black-cloaked figures moved in frantic haste, pointing, shouting. The great horn that had stood there for centuries was being dragged to the edge by a dozen men straining at ropes. They blew it as Balerion approached. The sound rolled over him, deep and mournful, the note of something ending. In the forest beyond the wall, the shadows moved. They came out of the trees like mist, like a tide of gray and white and blue. Aegon's mind could not make sense of their numbers. They were simply many. Dead men, skin pale and eyes glassy, dressed in the rags of Northmen, wildlings, even some in black. Behind them, walking with the unconcern of kings out for a stroll, came others. Tall, thin, armor that looked like carved ice, intricate and cruel. Eyes like stars seen at the bottom of a frozen lake. Swords that glowed with a cold so intense it burned. One of them lifted its head, looking up at the dragon against the sky. It smiled. For a heartbeat, Aegon felt something looking back through him, along the bond that joined him to his descendants, down into the halls of the Red Keep, into Dragonstone, into all the places where dragon blood slept. He snapped the connection shut with a savage effort. No, he thought, not in words, but in sheer, burning refusal. The other tilted its head, as if amused. Balerion roared. The sound was fire given voice, the rage of volcano and furnace combined. His chest heaved, and he exhaled a torrent of black-red flame that poured down upon the dead like the wrath of gods. Fire met cold. The first ranks of whites went up like dry tinder, their flesh shriveling, bones collapsing. The ground steamed. The snow hissed. For a moment, Aegon exulted. This was what dragons were made for. Then the flames met something else. The tall others lifted their swords as if in mock salute. The cold around them intensified, turning the air to glass. When the fire washed over them, it turned blue. Not all of it. Not enough to extinguish Balerion's breath. But tendrils of flame twisted, changed, flickering with an eerie cerulean light. Where they touched the ground, the snow did not melt. It fused into a slick, glassy substance that cracked but did not yield. Balerion's roar faltered, his chest seizing. Pain knifed through Aegon, a new pain, unlike old wounds, as if part of his fire had been turned against him from within. He coughed flame that was streaked with blue. The wall shook. Cracks, fine as hair at first, spider-webbed out from the place where fire and ice had met. They ran up the face of the ice, whispering, spreading. Men on the top staggered as their footing shifted. Again! Aenar shouted from the red dragon's back. He sounded terrified and ecstatic both. Burn them! Burn it all! We will bring the wall down on our own heads, Aegon thought. But the point was moot. There was no choice. If the wall fell while the others were still beyond it, the realm might yet have a chance. If it held long enough for them to find another way through. Better to choose the manner of its breaking. They dove together, black and red, fire streaming from their jaws. The world below became a blur of white and blue and screaming. For a time, there was nothing but battle. Aegon lost himself in it, in the twin sensations of dragon and destruction. He felt the heat of his own fire baking his scales, the bite of cold against his wings as shards of ice flew past. He felt whites flung into the air by the force of his blows, only to rise again unless burned thoroughly. He felt once the cold kiss of an ice sword glance off his scales. It left a frostburn deep in his flesh that did not melt, even under the heat of his own body. Through it all, he watched for the tall ones, the others, the true heart of the threat. They did not fight like men. They wove through the chaos with eerie grace, their movements almost lazy. When he burned where they stood, they were elsewhere already, or turned his fire aside with a twist of their blades. One of them raised an arm. The wind howled. A lance of cold shot upward, visible only as a distortion in the air, like heat made opposite. It struck Balerion in the chest. For an instant, Aegon felt his heart seize. The dragon staggered in midair. Enar. Aegon forced the thought outward. No. The red dragon stooped, smaller body slipping through the gusts. Enar's dragonfire was not as intense as Balerion's, but it was pure. It slammed into the raised other like a hammer. For a heartbeat, fire and ice wrestled. Then the tall figure shattered, pieces falling like jagged glass. The whites around it faltered, some collapsing back into true death. Not enough. Never enough. The cracks in the wall had spread. Great slabs of ice were sloughing off, crashing down in thunderous avalanches. Men on top ran for their lives, some making it, some not. Aegon felt the structure failing. The ancient magics woven into it shuddered, strained, then began to unravel like rotted rope. He had wondered for years what it would take to break the wall. Now, he knew. As they rose for another pass, Aegon realized there was no path from this battle that did not end in ruin. Either the wall would hold long enough for the others to find another breach, or it would fall now, in a cataclysm that would reshape the north. The realm would need more than dragonfire and swords to weather what came after. It would need something he had never truly given it, a unity that went deeper than oaths taken at sword point, a bond that would endure beyond any single king or war. In the heart of battle, he remembered the ritual beneath Dragonstone, the way his blood had steamed on hot stone, the way his essence had become thread in a larger weave. He remembered the glimpses of futures where dragon blood mingled with winter's. We can bind ourselves, he thought. Dragon to dragon. Why not more? Madness, as Nya would have called it. Perhaps it was, but he had long since passed the point where fear of madness could stay his hand. If he could, in this moment of breaking, lay a geas upon the realm itself, not a spell that would force obedience. Such things turned always, but a net of oaths that would resonate across generations, making unity easier than division, making betrayal burn like a brand. He did not know if it was possible. He did not know if even Valyria at its height could have managed such a working. But he had dragonfire, old blood, and a wall of ice that had stood for thousands of years as a testament to magic greater than his dreams. He had, above all, one last act to give. Balerion, he thought, turning inward, even as another gust of killing cold rose from below. Brother Dart, this will break us. The dragon did not understand the words, but he understood the feeling, the sense of finality, of a last flight. He rumbled, a sound of grim acceptance. Pack, he thought. Fire. Sky. He banked one last time, climbing higher than any bird, higher than the top of the wall, higher than the clouds. The air thinned, cold and thin, burning in lungs. His wings trembled with strain. Ice rimed his edges, even as heat built in his chest. Below, the world was a patchwork. The white of the north, the faint green and brown beyond, the gray line of the wall cracking like old glass. Enar shouted something, a thin speck on his red dragon far below, trying to follow. But he could not match Balerion's ascent. Now, Aegon thought, he gathered everything. All the dragon fire in Balerion's vast body. All the life left in his own soul. All the memories of crowns and oaths and broken fields, of dreams of unity, and the stubborn refusal of men to see the necessity of it until they were dying. He called to the old magics woven into the wall by children of the forest and the first men, to the weirwoods whose roots drank memory. He called to the Seven, and to the nameless gods of Valyria, to R'hllor and to the shadows deep in Dragonstone. I would bind them, he thought, not as slaves, but as kin. Let there be something in the bones of this land that remembers this day. When winter comes again, let the choice to stand together be easier than the choice to stand apart. He did not know if anyone heard him. He opened his jaws. Fire poured out, not in a stream, but in a torrent, a star falling toward earth. It was all the heat he and Balerion had ever contained, all the rage of the volcano that had birthed the dragon, all the will of a man who had crossed half the world to make something better than it was. It fell in a pillar of black, red, white that speared the wall. Ice screamed. The impact shattered hearing, sight, sense. The wall broke not in pieces, but in a single catastrophic convulsion. Great slabs of ice split, tumbled, exploded into shards that flew for miles. The ground shook like a living thing trying to throw off a burden. For an instant, the world was nothing but light and sound. In that instant, Aegon reached out. He touched Winterfell, where a stark lord clung to the crenellations and stared in horror at the falling wall. He touched King's Landing, where his descendants cried out as the castle shuddered. He touched Old Town, the airy sun spear, 1,000 minor keeps and crofts where men and women had never heard his name. He left a mark in each, a faint echo. Not command, not compulsion. A memory perhaps of fire over ice, of a choice made. Then he burned. Fire and cold wrapped around him, around Balerion. The dragon's heart burst like an overstrained bellows. Pain, more immense than any human could remember, flashed through them both, and then there was nothing. For a long time, centuries later, a maester of the citadel named Herwin sat bent over a table in a tower of the Red Keep, poring over brittle scrolls. Outside, King's Landing spread in all directions, louder and dirtier and stranger than it had been in Aegon's day. The city stank of fish and horse and too many people, but it gleamed too, with glass, with marble, with the steel of new towers rising. The Iron Throne still stood in the Great Hall, a hulking monstrosity of swords that had been reforged and reimagined half a dozen times by kings who tried to make it more comfortable and failed. Dragons still wheeled above the city sometimes, though they were smaller now, leaner. The great beasts of old whispered about in taverns as myths. Herwin dipped his quill and frowned down at the parchment. "It is recorded in the oldest annals," he murmured, "that in the time of Aegon the Conqueror." He paused. The Conqueror. It had been the name for him so long that no one questioned it. Aegon the Conqueror, who had united the Seven Kingdoms beneath his rule. Aegon the Dragon. Aegon the First. Except, Herwin had spent his life in archives. He had read accounts few others bothered with, moldy letters from minor lords, fragmentary journals of hedge knights, the confused ramblings of a long-dead brother of the Night's Watch, who claimed to have seen the wall fall. He had pieced together what he could. It did not make for a simple story. There had been a first landing, yes. A battle lost. Years of retreat and rebuilding on Dragonstone that most official histories glossed over with a line or two. A second campaign of treaties and wars that had, eventually, brought most of the realm under Targaryen rule. And then, much later, centuries after Aegon's supposed death, there were accounts, confused, half-legend, of a black dragon burning blue at the wall, of a king in the sky who gave his life to break something that was already breaking. Herwin leaned back, listening to the distant roar of a dragon over the city. He was old, as maesters went, and his eyes were not what they had been, but he still loved the puzzle of history. The way one could sometimes glimpse the shape of a man through 1,000 contradictory tales. He dipped his quill again and scratched a line. "Aegon of House Targaryen," he wrote, called the Conqueror by some and the Binder by others, lived a life longer than any man, if the more fanciful tales are to be believed. He failed, and he learned from that failure. He forged, and he saw what he had forged begin to crack. In the end, whether in his own flesh or through fire and dragon's heart, centuries later, he gave his life not merely to unite the realms of men, but to bind them in a way that we. He paused. Outside, somewhere beyond the horizon, snow fell on distant hills. Kings rose and fell. Wars flared in borderlands no one in the capital had heard of yesterday and would not remember tomorrow. And yet, when the wild winters came, when new threats stirred beyond the shrunken wall, there was, always, something that pulled the realms back from the brink of breaking entirely. some deep reluctance to let the seven, and the men and women who worshipped them, tear themselves apart while the dark watched. Call it chance, Herwin thought. Call it the gods. Or call it the last work of a man with dragon's fire in his veins and too many futures in his dreams. He smiled faintly and bent again to his work. On the other side of time, in a place that was not a place, where stories brushed against one another like wings in a vast dark sky, a man with silver hair and violet eyes and scarred, calloused hands looked down on a map of the world he had once walked. It was not painted on wood this time. It was made of lights, each one a life. He watched as they flared and dimmed, as they moved in patterns that echoed battles and treaties he remembered, and those he had never seen. He watched as, when winter came, more often than not, lines of light flowed toward one another, not away. He did not smile, but some of the tightness in his chest eased. "You were right," a voice said beside him, dry and sharp and beloved. "You always did prefer the long game." He turned. Visenya stood there, dark sister at her hip, hair bound back, eyes amused and exasperated both. Rhaenys was there too, laughing softly as she watched dragons wheel in the distances between stars. Aegon looked back at the map of living light. "It was never about the crown," he said. "It was never only about it," Visenya corrected. "Next time," Rhaenys said, her smile bright as any flame, "try to conquer a smaller continent first." Aegon chuckled, low and surprised, and reached for their hands. Below, in the world of flesh and time, a girl in a northern keep and a boy in a seaside village, and a dozen other men and women, none of whom had ever heard the true story of Aegon Targaryen, looked up at the same moment. They felt, faintly, the echo of an old promise made in fire over ice. When their turn came to choose between standing alone against the dark or standing together, the choice felt, for reasons they could not name, a little easier. That was all he had ever wanted. Hey! He closed his eyes, and in the dark behind them another image rose. Snow blackened by soot and shards of a fallen wall glittering like broken stars. When the roar died at the end of the world, there was no sound for a moment but the crackle of settling ice. Prince Aegon Targaryen lay half-buried in drift and ash, his breath coming in ragged sobs, every inhale cold as knives. Snowflakes landed on his cheeks and hissed where they touched the faint heat still radiating from his armor. The sky above him was a dirty gray, smeared with black, and where the wall had once stood there was only a jagged emptiness like a missing tooth. He pushed himself up on shaking arms. The top of the wall was gone. The colossal curtain of ice that had divided the world for thousands of years was shattered into cliffs and islands and leaning, creaking towers of frost. Fissures gaped where the structure had split. Chunks the size of keeps lay half-buried in the churned snow. Mist rolled from them, veiling the northern side in white. In the midst of it all lay a furrow of black glass and fused ice where the fire had struck. Aegon turned toward it, as if drawn. The trench carved by Balerian's last breath ran from sky to horizon, a wound in the world. Ice had been melted to slag, then cooled too fast, leaving ripples and bubbles frozen mid-burst. Snow would not settle on it. Where scattered flakes touched the fused surface, they slid off as if repelled. Something in it hummed, low and constant, like a plucked string too deep to hear, and yet still felt in the bones. Behind Aegon came the clatter of boots. "Your Highness!" a voice rasped. "Seven, save us, you're alive." Hands seized him under the arms and hauled him fully out of the drift. Aegon blinked stinging, smoke-gritted eyes, and found himself staring into the weather-beaten face of a man in black. Lord Commander Harold of the Night's Watch looked older than he had at dawn. Ice rimed his beard, and a livid cut sliced along his brow, leaking blood into one eye. Behind him, a ragged line of black-cloaked brothers stood against the ruins, some leaning on spears, some on each other. "I'd thought you'd gone with the Great One," the Lord Commander said. His gaze flicked to the rent in the sky where Balerion had climbed, then to the empty air above. There was no dragon there now, only smoke. Aegon swallowed. He could still feel it. The echo of Balerion's last heartbeat, a thunderclap that had run through his own chest before everything turned to light. It left a hollow ache behind, like the silence after a song that had gone on so long you had forgotten there could be quiet. "He's gone," Aegon said, voice raw. Saying it made it more true. "My great-grandfather." Harold's mouth quirked, something like a grim smile. "Is that what he was? I suppose it fits. Hard to imagine that one as anyone's anything." A horn lay half-buried near Aenar's boot, its mouth cracked, its body rimed with hoarfrost and black soot both. He remembered the sound it had made when they'd blown it as Balerion rose, deep and mournful, like a farewell. He looked north. Where the armies of the dead had stood, there was chaos. The front ranks, those closest to the blast, were simply gone, reduced to ash and drifting motes. Further back, the snow was littered with dead things that were truly dead now, their limbs twisted at impossible angles. Many had been thrown by the force of the wall's collapse. They lay half-buried or impaled on shards of ice, their blue eyes gone dull and human, their skin sagging into ordinary corpse pallor. But not all. Beyond the fused trench, in the shadow of the steaming ice cliffs, some of the tall figures still moved. There were fewer than before. Aegon counted half as many as he'd seen when they'd first emerged from the trees, maybe less. Their ranks had been torn apart, their ordered advance broken. Yet they walked, slowly, unhurriedly, as if they had all the time the world could offer. One paused at the edge of the black glass. Its armor was cracked, one arm hanging limp and twisted, but it still held its crystalline sword in its good hand. Its face turned toward the south, toward Aegon and the men on the ruined wall. It smiled. Aenar's breath caught. He felt for an instant a cold touch at the back of his mind, like a hand pressing against ice on the far side of a window. It probed, searching along invisible threads, as if tasting where power had moved. He thought of the moment when Balerion's fire had turned blue, of the wall's old magics groaning under strain. "Get out," Aegon's voice whispered. Not in words, not even in a voice, but in the memory of command. "Retreat. This day is done. The next has yet to be fought." Aenar's hand clenched on the hilt of his sword. He could not see his forebear, not the way he'd felt him in the air as they climbed. That presence was gone, burned away with the dragon. But something of the man lingered like heat in banked coals. A sense of intent, of unfinished work. "Back!" Aegon shouted, forcing his voice over the ringing in his ears. "Off the ice, off the wall. Pull back to the castles. Eastwatch, Castle Black, Shadow Tower. We hold there until the wall's gone," someone muttered. "Numb. What's the point?" Harold rounded on the man. "The point," he snarled, "is that there's still men breathing. Move, you mutton-headed son of a goat!" The curse broke the spell. Men scrambled for the makeshift steps hacked into the ice and the rope ladders that had somehow not all been torn away. They moved like sleepwalkers, stunned and aching, but they moved. "Your Highness," Harold said, turning back to Aegon. "You need to get south. Tell them, tell everyone. No one will believe the likes of us." He gestured at his scorched, ragged men. "But a prince." "I'm not leaving," Aegon began. Then he looked again north, at the marching shadows beyond the fused trench. They were not attacking. They had stopped at the edge of the melted glass. Ranks were forming. Some turned away, melting back into the forest. Others simply stood, watching, waiting. We hurt them, Aegon thought, dazed. But we did not break them. Grandfather's fire bought time, not victory. Your duty's not to die here, Harold said bluntly. It's to make sure this wasn't for nothing. Duty. The word bit as sharply as the cold. He thought of King's Landing, of the crowded streets and high, smoky ceilings of the Red Keep, of his father on the Iron Throne, his mother in the solar with her hawk-bright eyes, of a realm that had taken Aegon's peace as its birthright, grumbling at taxes, squabbling over trade, never imagining that the dead could walk. He thought of the way the horn had sounded like goodbye. "All right," he said. He felt suddenly hollow, as if his bones had been scraped out and filled with ice. "I'll go, but you send ravens ahead of me, Lord Commander. Every castle between here and the Neck, every hall. Tell them the wall has fallen." "They'll think it a jest," Harold said. "But I'll send them." His expression softened, just a fraction. "7 watch over you, Prince." They clasped wrists, rough leather against plate. Then Aegon turned away from the wound in the world and staggered toward the half-buried shape of his dragon. The red had survived. His scales were cracked and rimed with frost in places, and one wing hung at an awkward angle, the membrane torn. But his great chest still rose and fell. When Aegon laid a hand against his muzzle, the eye nearest him rolled open, slitted pupil contracting against the gray light. "Easy," Aegon murmured. His breath made little clouds in the air. "Easy, Caraxes." The name felt right in his mouth, though it had not come from anywhere he knew. He'd called the dragon by that since he was a boy, as if the sound had been waiting for him. Caraxes snorted weakly, blasting him with air that was hot enough to sting, though nowhere near the furnace heat Aegon was used to. "We're going south," Aegon told him. "Home. Home." He did not know how far that would remain true, with the wall down and something cold and patient waiting in the north. But it was a direction. It would do. Behind them, as the remnants of the watch and a handful of southern knights began their retreat, the tall figure at the edge of the fused trench lifted its sword. The sound that rolled across the broken ground was not a horn. It was a crack of ice that echoed like a voice. The first council was held at Winterfell because there was no other place left that felt close enough to the danger and solid enough to bear the weight of what had to be said. The journey south nearly killed Aegon. He flew as far as he could each day, Caraxes' wounded wing forcing them to glide more than soar. When the dragon tired, they landed in frozen fields or on the empty barrows of the first men and shared warmth under his vast wing. Snowstorms swept in without warning, forcing them down. Twice, Aegon saw whites in the distance, silhouettes shambling through the white, but they did not cross the black glass scars that scored the land like rivers of obsidian. He did not know if that was Aegon's doing or some older power reacting to the mingling of fire and ice. He only knew that when he walked near those fused stretches, the hair on his arms rose and a prickling ran down his spine. "It feels like an oath," he thought once, without knowing why. At Castle Black, Eastwatch, and the Shadow Tower, he found chaos. The garrisons had survived mostly. Their stone walls had groaned under the wall's fall, but held. Men moved like harried ants, hauling supplies, shoring up breaches, staring north with eyes ringed in red. Ravens flew almost constantly, black specks against the gray. At each stronghold, Aegon sat with grizzled officers and wide-eyed stewards, repeating what he had seen until his throat burned. Every time he felt the same odd moment as the words left his mouth, a tug, as if something in the air were leaning in to listen. "The wall is gone," he said. "Not in story. Not, in part, gone. The dead march. We bought time, not safety. You will warn your lords." "Nah." Some men blanched. Some argued. A few burly sergeants muttered that they'd always known the end would come in snow and blood. But none laughed. None called him mad. That, more than anything, frightened him. By the time he reached Winterfell, the ravens had flown ahead of him, and the great hall was full. The heat hit him like a wave when he stepped inside. After weeks of cold so deep it had felt like part of his marrow, the rush of warm air smelt of smoke and roasted meat and wet wool was almost dizzying. Long tables stretched from the dais to the doors, packed with men and women in furs and mail. Stags and trout and krakens and falcons and roses and lions jostled on cloak fasteners and breastplates. The great direwolf of House Stark snarled down from its place on the banners above, flanked by Tully-leaping trout and the crowned stag of the Stormlands. Aegon had never seen so many great houses gathered in one place outside of a coronation. At the high table sat Lord Brandon Stark, tall and broad-shouldered, with streaks of white in his dark hair. His face was weathered as an old oaken door, and his gray eyes were steady. Beside him sat his lady, a Karstark by birth, and on his right a youth who could only be his heir, Cregan, perhaps 16, with the stubborn jaw of his line. On the other side of the Lord's seat, a chair had been left for Aegon. It was empty. As he walked up the aisle between tables, the murmur of voices dwindled. Men turned to look at him, their gazes weighing him as they had weighed his great-grandfather before him on another, very different day. He could almost feel Aegon's ghost at his shoulder. He bowed to Lord Stark, not deeply enough to shame the crown he bore by birth, but with genuine respect. "My lord," he said. His voice echoed in the rafters. "Thank you for calling them." Lord Brandon snorted softly. "Didn't need much calling," he said. "Between your ravens and the earth shaking under our feet, most were halfway to my gates before my own birds reached them. Sit, Dragon Prince. Then speak." Aegon sat. For a moment, he only listened. Voices had resumed in low eddies around the hall. The Lord of Karhold muttered with his neighbor about the loss of a watchtower swept away by falling ice. A Manderly, identifiable by his bulk and the silver mermaid on his breast, spoke earnestly to a slight man in Arryn blue. A sour-faced Lannister envoy with a golden lion at his throat sat stiffly, as if offended by the very warmth, while a Baratheon lordling lounged beside him, tapping restless fingers on the table. "They are afraid," Aegon thought. "Every last one. They wear it differently, but it's there." He stood again before fear hardened into anger. "My lords," he said. "My ladies, you've heard pieces of it, in rumor and in Raven's scratched scrawl. Hear it now from me. Me. And Kim." He told them of the night at the wall, of the first sight of the dead ranks, marching in a silence so deep it swallowed the wind, of the tall figures among them whose eyes seemed to drink the light, of the way the cold had bitten through Dragonhide. He told them of Balerion's ascent, of the fire that had fallen, of the wall cracking like old bone. He did not linger on his great-grandfather's last moment. Part of it would not fit into words. The rest he simply did not trust his voice to carry. "And when I woke," he finished, "the wall was broken. The dead were scattered, but not destroyed. The others withdrew beyond the fused ice. They are not gone. Only the game has changed." The hall was silent when he finished. Even the servants had gone still, pitchers poised over trenchers. Lord Brandon's gaze never left his face. When Aegon sat, the Lord of Winterfell rose. "I have seen the scars in the land with my own eyes. These rivers of black glass," he said. "I've sent men to ride along them. They run in jagged lines from east to west, crossing old roads, cutting through woods, turning streams aside." His mouth tightened. "The dead have not crossed them. Not yet. They come near and then pull back as if the very sight offends them. Then we're safe behind them," someone muttered from the Tully contingent. "Are we?" Lord Brandon asked. His gray eyes snapped toward the man. "What happens when those black scars run out? They do not reach the neck. They do not encircle us." "Build another wall," suggested a Reachman with Tyrell roses on his cloak. "Stone or steel this time. If ice breaks, use rock. Now, the first wall took thousands of years to raise, if the old songs are true," Brandon said. "Will not raise its twin in a season, and stone doesn't stop cold in a man's bones." A low, bitter chuckle sounded. It came from a man in Baratheon black and gold, his hair the color of storm clouds. "So we sit here and piss ourselves," he said. "Fine counsel. You have better? Enar asked, sharper than he'd intended. Baratheon's dark eyes swung his way. They were not hostile, merely assessing. I have a war, the Stormlord said. We fight. We do not hide behind glass and hope the shadows turn back. If those things, he spat the word, mean to come for my lands, they'll find a line of shields to meet them. Crown or no crown. There is a crown, the Lannister envoy said coolly, speaking for the first time. In King's Landing, on the head of your father, your highness. Should these tales be true, it seems to me the proper course is clear. The king commands, his vassals obey. That is the order Aegon set in place. And if the king is slow to see, asked a woman from the Vale, her falcon cloak clasped with silver. If he hears your ravens, prince, and thinks them exaggeration, or worse, someone else's opportunity? The Lannister's lips thinned. His grace is no fool. He is not here, Lord Brandon said flatly. We are, and there will not be time when the dead move again for messages to pass back and forth half a dozen times while courtiers argue over precedence. He put his hands flat on the high table, broad fingers splaying. My father used to say there are two kinds of winters, he went on. Those that make us grumble and those that make us share. In an ordinary winter, a man curses the snow and minds his own hearth. In a true winter, he opens his door to his neighbor rather than listen to a child crying next door. Enter I. He nodded toward Enar. This is the second kind, he said. Worse, maybe. A winter with teeth and a long memory. If we go back to our holds and wait for the crown to send legions, we'll die one at a time, in the snow. And the dead will rise in our colors. The words lay heavy in the hall. Enar felt something stir then, not in the air, not exactly, but in the space between hearts. It was as if the hall itself took a breath, as if the black glass woven through the land had, for a moment, reached through stone and iron and blood. They all felt it. He saw it in the way shoulders tensed, in the way hands twitched toward amulets or sword hilts. A prickle ran along his arms, hair lifting. It was the same sensation he'd had near the fused trench, that low, insistent hum. Aegon, he thought, startled. Is this you? If there was an answer, it was wordless. An urging, not a command. A deep, resonant push that made the selfish thought, the instinct to turn inward, to guard one's own hall and let distant neighbors fend for themselves, sit strangely ill at ease. It would have been so easy in other years for each of these lords to go home, promise polite support, and quietly send a token company north while hoarding the rest. Now when Enar pictured it, when half the men in the hall pictured it, there was a taste of ash in their mouths. Lord Brandon straightened. The Starks of Winterfell will stand, he said, as we always have. We'll send men north to hold the ruined castles and scouts to track where the dead gather. We'll feed any who come to fight so far as our stores allow. But we can't do it alone. His gaze swept the hall. We need more than separate vows. We need something that binds us all, not to a king in a distant city, not only, but to each other. He looked to Enar. Your ancestor was not shy about swearing oaths, he said dryly. Perhaps there's use in that yet. Enar's throat tightened. He remembered the feel of Balerion's heart slowing under his own, the way his great-grandfather had reached outward at the last, touching minds and halls and roots. He had not known then exactly what Aegon meant to do. He only knew the word that had thrummed through that moment. Bind. We swore to Aegon once, a Tully lord said slowly. River and crown. That oath has kept the trident out of as much blood as it might have seen. Not all, but some. He looked around. I'd swear again, on different terms. Terms, grunted the Manderly. Always terms with you, Trout. Terms are how men live together instead of killing each other, the Vale woman said sharply. Enar found his voice. My great-grandfather didn't die to make you kneel again at sword point, he said. He died to give you this choice, to let you walk toward each other instead of being driven together like cattle. He took a breath. "Make a new pact," he said. "Not the conquest oaths, where each of you swore separately to a dragon you feared. Something shared. A bond between the great houses that can't be lightly broken. Good. And if we break it?" the Lannister asked softly. Golden head tilted. Aenar's gaze met his. "Then may it burn," he said. "May it sit in your bones like a splinter. May every man and woman who thinks of turning away from the front feel that choice like a wound." The Lannister's nostrils flared. "You threaten curses now, Prince." "I speak of what's already there," Aenar said, surprised to realize it was true. "Can't you feel it? The land remembers what happened at the wall. The stones of the castles remember. Men may pretend otherwise, but their very blood." He spread his hands, helpless to explain the way the hum in the hall had thickened with every word. "You can resist it. You're stubborn enough. But it will be harder than it was before. And if you stand, it will be easier than it was too. That's all." A murmur ran through the crowd. Unease, and something else layered together. "Seven see me damned," the Baratheon said, shaking his head. "I do feel it, like the air before a storm. Hate magic," he added, almost as an afterthought. "But I hate freezing my balls off more." He slammed his palm on the table. "Fine," he said. "Storm's End will send men when the North calls, not when King's Landing does. When Winterfell's horns blow thrice, my banners ride. That's my word." Lord Brandon's mouth twitched. "Winterfell will not blow those horns lightly," he said. "But you have my pledge in return. When the Stormlands cry famine in a long winter, our ships will bring grain as far as we're able. When the Trident floods, we'll send timber. When the Vale slides, we'll send men to dig." "Me. Righteous nonsense," grumbled an old knight half under his breath. Yet he was already nodding. One by one, they gave their words. Some did it gruffly, as if reluctant to be heard, sounding too noble. Some did it with shining eyes. Some did it with calculation written plain in their faces, already tallying the costs and gains. It did not matter why. It only mattered that they spoke. As each oath was given, the feeling in the hall deepened. The sense of something settling, like a net tying knots. Aenar saw lords flinch when another house pledged in terms that bound them too. He saw others straighten as if a weight had shifted from their shoulders. When it was done, Lord Brandon took up a jug of dark, hot wine and poured a measure into a broad, shallow bowl carved of weirwood. "Blood is binding," he said, "but we have spilled enough of that. Let this stand in its stead." He drank first, then passed the bowl to Aenar. The wine was strong and bitter, tasting of ash and pine. As it burned down his throat, Aenar closed his eyes. For a heartbeat, the hall vanished. He saw instead a map of Westeros drawn in lines of fire and frost. He saw points of light where oaths had been sworn brighten, threads running between them. He saw, above all, the fused scars left by Balerion's last breath hum in answer, as if acknowledging the pact. Through it all, faint and far away but unmistakable, he felt a flicker of pride. "Well done," that echo seemed to say. Then it was gone, and he was just a young prince in a hall full of weary lords, throat burning. He passed the bowl on. The years that followed were not simple, and they were not kind. The wall's fall had altered more than geography. It had changed weather patterns and sea currents in ways no maester could fully explain. Winters came longer, deeper. Summers were brief and fierce, with storms that tore ships from their moorings. The dead did not remain beyond the fused trenches. They came probing, not in the great rolling tide Aenar had seen that first night, but in raids and testing pushes. A band of whites would move south under cover of blizzard, guided by pale figures that melted into the mist when dragonfire fell. They hit isolated holds and small villages, leaving behind silence and houses rimed in frost. In the old days, such attacks would have been some other lord's problem. Under the Winter Pact, word spread faster. Ravens flew along routes that had been carefully established. Men drilled not only in their own musters, but in the ways they would fight alongside strangers. A line of fortified beacons was built along the length of the fused scars, each topped with iron cages stocked with pitch and dragonglass-tipped arrows. It was not enough. Always. They still lost people. They still lost keeps. But when the dead came, more often than not, there were men waiting. Aegon spent those years largely in the north. The Red Keep and its politics felt very far away from the trenches at the edge of the shattered lands where black glass and broken ice met like jagged waves. His father quarreled with the faith, argued with trade envoys from Bravos, and sired more children. Aegon sent letters and ravens and attended court when he could. Yet his true throne was a saddle of leather and steel atop Carax's back. His true court, the line of commanders, crouched over rough maps, marked with cold blue as often as warm red. He fought in a dozen battles no singer ever wrote of. On a night at the ruins of the Night Fort when men huddled in the old haunted halls and listened to the scrape of skeletal fingers on the outer stones. At the long lake, where Carax's fire turned its surface to a skin of boiling mist and whites walked beneath, only to burst from the water further along. In the foothills of the Frostfangs, where wildlings and Southron men fought back to back for the first time, after promises made in a language of handshakes and shared ale, he grew older. Not like his great-grandfather. The fire in his veins did not make him live beyond natural span. But slowly, as winters waxed and waned and the pact held, first lines appeared at the corners of his eyes, first gray strands in his silver-gold hair. Carax's wings bore new scars. Sometimes, in exhausted sleep, he saw Aegon, never clearly, always from the side, or as a reflection in a cup of dark water. A man standing over a painted table, his hands resting on a realm that would never match the neat lines of his map. A rider on a dragon disappearing into the clouds. He never spoke. He only watched. On a night halfway through what the Maesters would later call the breaking winter, when snow had fallen on Old Town's walls for the first time in living memory, and the Trident had frozen hard enough to bear wagons, the others came in force. They did not do it where men expected them. Scouts and watchers along the fused scars in the far north sent word of increased activity, yes. Yet the main blow fell further south, at a place where no one thought to stand a permanent garrison. The Neck. Some old ice magic still clung to that marshy bottleneck, remnants of the same sorcery that had once shaped the wall. When the wall broke, that magic had strained and shifted, like branches when a great trunk falls. For years, it had held. Then, a particularly savage storm swept down from the shivering sea, pushing a surge of cold so deep it froze the top layer of the swamp solid. On that frozen crust, the dead marched. Word reached Winterfell in ragged pieces. A burned watchtower, a Crannog lord's panicked raven, a merchant caravan that arrived days late with half its number gone and eyes too wide. Aegon flew south with Caraxes and found the Neck in chaos. The Grey Water men fought like mad animals in their own bogs, harrying the whites with poisoned darts and dragonglass knives. Northmen from White Harbor and Barrowton had thrown up palisades on the firmer islands, but the dead kept coming, crawling over each other when the ice broke, pulled forward by the relentless will of the tall ones among them. The first time Aegon saw an other at ground level, not from the sky, he understood why the old tales had spoken of them as kings. The creature stood in the mist 30 yards beyond the foremost palisade, its armor gleaming like a second skin. Frost crawled along its sword with every breath it took. Where its bare feet touched the ground, the mud froze. It moved with such unhurried grace that everything around it, stumbling whites, men shouting, flames licking at wood, seemed clumsy by comparison. Caraxes landed behind the line, shaking the earth. His roar cut the air in two. Men cheered hoarsely, relief and terror mingling. The other turned its head, pale eyes focusing for the first time on something that made even it take note. Aegon swung down from the saddle. "Stay back," he told the nearest men. "If the dead come through, burn them. Use the glass. But that," he nodded toward the other, "is mine." "Your Highness," someone began. "Let him," rasped an old Crannog man with frog spears on his back. "The pact brought him. Let it work." Aegon stepped forward onto the mush of snow and churned peat. Every breath smoked in front of him. The cold pouring off the other was a wall in itself. It raised its sword, casual, like a man acknowledging another at a tourney ground. Aegon drew his own blade. It was Valyrian steel, black and rippled. It had been forged in another age and given to him at his majority, its name old as dragonkind. Nightfall. The two crossed the churned ground between them without haste. Behind them, Caraxes crouched, muscles bunched, ready to spring. Men on the palisades held their breath. The dead near the front lines had gone strangely still, as if some unseen hand held them leashed. The other struck first. Its blade moved faster than Aenar's eyes could follow. A thrust, a flick, a cut that would have taken his head if he'd been a fraction slower. As it was, he felt the cold nip his cheek, raising white crystals on his skin. He parried badly, barely redirecting the blow. The impact sent a shock up his arm, numbing fingers. The second strike he managed a little better. The third, he read the faint shift in the other's shoulders and met it edge on. Valyrian steel and ice blade kissed. Sound rang out, high and shrill. The note of glass struck with metal and something older driven deep. A wave of cold rolled through the camp, frosting beards and bowstrings. Flames guttered, shrank, then flared again with angry brightness. Aegon gritted his teeth. It felt in that moment like he was crossing swords not with a single foe, but with the winter itself. Every fear any man had ever had of not making it through the dark months pressed against his chest. He thrust back. The other's smile thinned. They fenced in a churn of white breath and flying frost, stroke after stroke. Aenar's muscles burned, his lungs cried, his fingers ached with cold. The other moved as if it felt none of it, as if the exertion were an elegant exercise. Then, on the 13th pass, Aegon felt something shift. Not in his body, in the world. Far away, perhaps in Old Town, perhaps at the Eyrie, perhaps in a dozen smoky halls, lords and ladies who had sworn at Winterfell looked up from ledgers or training yards or sickbeds with hearts pounding. They did not know why they were suddenly thinking of the neck. They only knew that it would be wrong to ignore it. Messengers changed course. Orders were snapped. Ships that had been preparing to sail with cloth and wine instead took on dragonglass and men. The GS Aegon had laid woke fully, humming down the lines of oath and blood. Aegon felt it. Not as a whisper, not as a voice, but as a swell of pressure at his back, like a wind in the sails of a ship. He had felt alone, on the edge of a bog, facing a creature older than his house. Now, abruptly, he did not. His next blow rang truer. Valyrian steel bit a little deeper into the frosty blade. A hairline crack appeared along the ice sword's length. The other's eyes narrowed. It lunged, faster than before, abandoning elegance. Its sword clanged against his, then twisted, trying to wrench Nightfall from his grip. Aegon slid aside, letting the force pass, and brought his own blade up in a rising cut. Black steel met the other's forearm. For an instant, there was resistance like frozen wood. Then, the limb parted. Frost exploded from the wound, dazzling the eyes. The other staggered, a sound escaping its throat. Not a cry, exactly, but a sharp intake, as if finally surprised. Around them, whites that had been holding still twitched, losing their focus. "No!" someone shouted. Arrows tipped with dragonglass hissed through the air. Firepots arced, smashing into ranks of corpses. Caraxes exhaled a jet of flames sideways, carefully, scorching a swath of dead without touching Aegon. The other looked down at its missing arm. Then it looked up at Aegon with sudden, burning hatred. It stepped forward, lifting its sword for one last strike. Nightfall was already moving. Aegon did not think. His arm knew the angle before his mind did. He brought the blade around in a hard, flat arc that met the udder's neck at just the right point, where the icy armor left a gap. Valyrian steel went through with a jarring resistance. The head toppled. For a heartbeat it hung there, face slackening from cruel amusement into something blank and eerie. Then both it and the body cracked, fissures running through them like lightning. The other exploded into a storm of ice shards. A wind howled out of nowhere, chilling everyone on the line to the bone. Whites near the front collapsed, their animating force gone. Far behind the lines, beyond sight, something screamed. Aegon sank to one knee, Nightfall digging into the frozen peat, his breath coming in harsh jolts. Caraxes roared triumph, echoing off the marsh and the distant, shattered remnant of the wall's power. It was not the end of the war. Others remained. Whites still rose where men died unwatched. Winters would come again, some harsher than this, but the neck held that day. And as reinforcements poured in over the following weeks, Northmen hacking down frozen corpses, Reachmen bringing grain and men-at-arms, Ironborn raiding dead ships instead of live villages for once, Aegon saw the shape of what his great-grandfather had tried to build. Not a realm forced together around a single will, but a habit of standing, side by side, when the dark moved. The pact was not perfect. Men still quarreled. Houses still schemed. Kings still sought their own glory. Yet when the horns of Winterfell blew thrice, something stirred in their bones that made it harder to say no. The breaking winter lasted 7 years. By the time it ebbed, Inar's hair had gone mostly silver-white, and the scars on Caraxes' wings had thickened into ridges. Lord Brandon Stark was dead, his son Cregan ruling in his stead, hard-eyed and iron-willed. Children born the year the wall fell grew up never knowing a world where the threat in the north was just a tale. When the snows finally began to recede, when the last tall figure melted into a shriek of ice and vanished beneath Caraxes' fire on a ridge overlooking the last river, there was no single crowning moment. No clear line between war and peace. There was only a day when no new whites were seen. And the next. And the next. After a year without an attack, the watch along the fused scars relaxed from a scream to a tense murmur. After 5, men began to build small holdfasts closer to the old line again, testing the land. After 10, the maesters began to argue whether the breaking winter had been the true return of the long night or merely a severe season. The pact did not dissolve. It changed. Some houses grumbled that they had borne more than their share. Others lobbied for recognition and special rights, pointing to banners lost in the bogs of the neck. The Crown and King's Landing tried more than once to fold the Winter Pact entirely into royal law, making it another tool of the throne. Yet, whenever a Lord of Winterfell or a Prince of Dragonstone stood to say, "Remember," there came that faint sensation in the air. A hum, a weight. Enough men remembered frozen faces at the windows and the sound of ice breaking under fire that they did not dare dismantle what had been built. Aegon died at Dragonstone, not on a battlefield. His last years were quieter. He spent more time in stone halls, less in leather and snow. He wrote, at the urging of a stubborn young maester, an account of everything he remembered from the night the wall fell to the Pact's forging. He did not know, when his hand cramped over the quill, that centuries later a man named Herwin would read those pages and shake his head at the gaps and contradictions. He did not know that Herwin would write of Aegon as binder as well as conqueror. He only knew that when he set down the words great-grandfather's last flight, his eyes blurred, and for a moment he was again a boy in a saddle, looking up at a streak of black climbing toward a gray, indifferent sky. On the night he died, a warm summer storm lashed Dragonstone's cliffs. Caraxes slept in the caverns below, his breath coming slow and deep. The bond between dragon and rider had never been as absolute as the one Aegon had forged, yet there was a thread there all the same. When it snapped, Caraxes woke with a low, restless moan. Rain beat on the Dragonmont. Thunder rolled. In the distance, over seas that had once seen Balerion's shadow, Lightning flickered. For a heartbeat, high above the island, a shape formed in the storm. Wings spread, fire trailing their edges. A man seated tall on its back. No one saw it. Nobody needed to. The pact held. The girl in the northern keep who had looked up at the same moment as the boy on the southern shore went about their lives. The great winters of their ages were milder than the breaking, but when strange cold came, they found it easier than their ancestors might have to set aside old grudges. When a rebellious vassal lord in the Westerlands tried to secede during a famine, citing ancient rights, his own bannermen balked in a way he could not understand. It felt wrong to them somehow, to tear away part of the tapestry when the world outside the walls still held fang and claw. When a zealot preacher stirred crowds against dragon abominations in Old Town, the fervor burned bright for a week. Then cooler heads prevailed, and even those warmed by his words found themselves hesitating when it came time to raise torches. In a seaside village of the Vale, an old woman, whose grandmother's grandmother had seen the neck choke on corpses, took a toddling grandchild onto her knee and told him a story of a man who had died 3 times for the same realm. She did not know his name correctly. She called him Aegon, or Ager, depending on how much ale she'd had. Some nights he was a king on a dragon, others he was a dragon who became a man. The details shifted. The shape remained. He failed first, she told the child, tapping him lightly on the nose. Fell out of the sky, all proud, and the lords laughed and went home. But he didn't stay down. No, he went away and got older and cleverer, and next time he held out his hands instead of his sword. And then when the cold came, he went up where no man could breathe and burned so bright that even now the snow remembers. Aye, the boy laughed, not understanding half. When he fell asleep that night, he dreamed of standing on a field of black glass, holding hands with strangers, and not feeling alone. Far above, in the place between stories where stands and falls and might have beens brush against each other, Aegon watched. Still watching other people's tables, Visenya said, not unkindly. You always did like maps too much. Maps are only lines, Aegon replied. People are what make them mean something. Rainey slipped her arm through his. Any regrets? She asked. He considered. He saw, in his mind's eye, the burning field where Meraxes had fallen. The long years on Dragonstone. The second conquest that had been more parchments than pitched battles. The black glass scars carved into the world. The child in the Vale with his muddled story. I failed often, he said. I lied sometimes. I burned men who might have been saved and spared others who did not deserve it. I thought a throne would solve more than it did. Nay, that's she. Rainey squeezed his arm. But I learned, he added. Eventually. Visenya snorted. Took you long enough. He smiled. The map of lights below shifted as another winter broke, gentler than the last. Somewhere, a Stark and a Targaryen argued over grain quota and laughed in the same breath. Somewhere else, a smith in Dorne forged a sword and etched along its fuller a 3-headed dragon and a direwolf chasing each other's tails, not knowing why he liked the pattern so much. Through multiple eras, Rainey said softly. You always did prefer long stories. Short ones end too soon, Aegon said. He watched as, in a tavern in King's Landing that had once stood on land where his first wooden fort had been raised, a hedge knight stood before a fire and began. Back in the days when dragons were big as mountains and winter walked like a man. The knight's version would be wrong too, but somewhere in the telling, in the moment when listeners leaned in, feeling something stir behind the words, the echo of a man on a dragon over a burning wall would ring true. In that echo, in the choices it made easier and the selfish deeds it made harder, Westeros was united more deeply than in any single coronation. That, more than crowns or swords, was the work Aegon Targaryen left behind. He let go of the map of lights and turned away at last, walking into whatever waited beyond the edge of knowing. His sisters at his side, the taste of ash and snow, and the hum of a realm learning slowly to stand together, still warm in his blood. Ka. In the tower at the edge of the Red Keep's outer wall, Maester Herwin lived long enough to see men argue about his words. The tower was not important. It had no name, no stories about ghosts or old kings jumping from its windows. It faced north, which pleased Herwin, and its arrow-slit windows let in more drafts than light, which displeased his joints and pleased his books. On the day the Raven came from Dragonstone, bringing news that Prince Anar was dead, Horwin's fingers had already begun to crook into claws from years of ink and winter. He sat by the brazier with a blanket around his shoulders, reading his own treatise by lamplight as if it had been written by someone else. Aegon of House Targaryen, he murmured. Called the Conqueror by some and the Binder by others. The door crashed open without a knock. Herwin flinched, nearly blotting the parchment. Maester, Sir Daeron Waters said, breathless, cheeks flushed from the climb. He was a young man still, though his dark hair already had a streak of silver at the temple. A Targaryen bastard, acknowledged but never quite comfortable with that half-place. You must come. The king. Herwin's heart sank. He had served 3 kings. He knew the tone. Is he gone? He asked. No. Daeron hesitated. But he will be soon, if the Grand Maester is right. They've already sent for the princess. They want you there. Herwin set the parchment aside. His hands trembled when he pushed himself up, but he straightened his spine. His chain, heavy with links of silver, gold, black iron, and stranger metals, clinked around his neck. Very well, he said. Help me down the stairs if you would. Daeron offered an arm, strong and steady. Herwin took it with more gratitude than pride allowed him to show. As they descended, the sounds of the city reached them in snatches. The distant roar of the streets, the clang of hammers from the smithy lines, the shrill cries of gulls circling over the Blackwater rush. Above all that, the deeper hum of King's Landing itself, the breathing of a city that had grown far beyond the muddy settlement Aegon had first landed in. Do you believe it? Daeron asked quietly as they walked along a corridor lined with tapestries showing dragons in flight. What you wrote. About Aegon, I mean. Nay, Herwin smiled thinly. I would be a poor maester if I did not believe my own quill, he said. Or a very good one, depending on who you ask. Daeron flushed. That's not what I meant. I mean, you talk as if he's still doing something, binding through us. They passed a tapestry showing a man on a black dragon over a burning wall of ice. The embroidery was inaccurate in a dozen ways. The wall too low, the dragon too small, the ice too blue, but the shape of it still made Horwin's breath catch. Whether or not he is, the old man said, we are. Men made the pact. Men keep it, or break it. Aegon is an excuse, or an example, or both. Nui, Day, Ki, Jai. That sounds like, I don't know, Daeron muttered. Herwin chuckled softly. It is as close as a maester comes to saying, I don't know in front of a prince, he said. Daeron snorted despite himself. They reached the king's apartments. The antechamber was full. Nobles in silks, guards in red cloaks, servants with eyes wide and careful. Beyond the carved doors, voices rose and fell, sharp, low, tight. Daeron shouldered a path through, drawing only a few annoyed looks. Bastard or not, he wore a sword and the little crown badge that marked him as one of the king's personal protectors. Herwin followed in his wake like a small gray shadow. Inside, the air was thick. King Merrick too lay on the great carved bed, his once thick hair thinned to wisps of pale gold on his spotted scalp. His face had sunk into itself, cheekbones like blades, skin papery. Each breath rattled in his chest. At his bedside stood his daughter. Princess Rhaelle Targaryen was not beautiful in the way the singers like to describe queens. Her features were too strong for that. A firm jaw, a straight nose a shade too long, eyes that tilted slightly at the outer corners. Her hair was pure silver gold, braided back from her face in a practical plait that reached her waist. She wore no jewels, but a slender circlet of black iron. Her hands were steady on her father's. Across from her, barely keeping a respectful distance from the bed, stood Prince Aegon. He was her cousin, son of Meraerk's younger brother, and he looked more like the dragons in the tapestries than any man had a right to. Silver hair tumbling to his shoulders, purple eyes that caught the light, a smile that came easy and often. He wore red and black, the three-headed dragon bright on his chest, the hilt of his sword jeweled. Between them hovered Grand Maester Alan, his chain more ostentatious than Herwin's, fingers fussing at his sleeves. "My king," Alan was saying, voice thick with false composure. "If you'll but take a sip of the draft." "The draft will not change what's coming," Merrick rasped. His eyes, filmed but still keen, flicked toward Herwin as he entered. "The one who writes about old ghosts. Come closer, Herwin." Herwin bowed his head and obeyed. Raelle looked up as he came to the bedside. Her eyes, a deep violet nearly black in this light, met his. There was fear in them, beneath iron control. "Maester," she said softly. "Your Highness," he replied. Merrick let out a breath that might have been a laugh. "I've read you," he wheezed. "Binder." Grand Maester sneered. "Said you were too fond of old ice stories." "I liked them." "Me." "Your Grace honors me," Herwin said. "Don't flatter," Merrick murmured. "No time. Listen, girl." Raelle's mouth compressed. "Father, listen." The word cracked like a whip. For a moment, Herwin glimpsed the man Merrick had been in his prime. Sharp, dangerous, a dragon with his own wits. "I've held this realm together through 3 bad harvests and 1 rebellion. I did it on the back of your great-great-grandfather's work and a deal of my own. But I've no sons, and the realm likes a man on the throne." "Nadia." His gaze slid toward Gaiman. The prince's smile flickered. "I kept you close, boy," Merrick said. "Fed you, knighted you, let you win tourneys you maybe shouldn't." His lips twitched. "Thought about naming you heir. Might still have if you'd had more sense." Gaiman's jaw clenched. "Uncle, you think they'll follow you because you look like the old paintings?" Merrick said. He coughed. A wet, harsh sound. "You and your little dragon." Gaiman's cheeks colored. He had indeed hatched a dragon. Small, lean, mean-tempered, more suited to scouting than battle. It perched in the dragon pit often, hissing at its cousins. The last of the truly great beasts had died with Inar, but some smaller ones still clung to life, pale shadows of Balerion and Caraxes. "They might," Merrick went on. "Some. Enough to make trouble. Enough to split the realm if I speak crooked with my last breath." His eyes went back to Raelle. "You have sense," he said. "And the pack at Winterfell likes you." He wheezed a chuckle. "You ride north in winter, when other pretty cockerels stay south. You speak softly to Manderless and loudly to Umbers. Good." Raelle's throat worked. "Father, please." "I can choose one," Merrick said. "Name you, or him, and we'll see another breaking winter. But this time all the snow will be men's madness, not the dead." The room seemed to tilt. Herwin heard the faint roar of the city beyond, the mutter of guards outside the door. Somewhere, a dragon screeched. A high, lonely sound. Merrick's fingers slipped from Raelle's hand. She caught them gently, holding them in both of hers. "There's another way," Herwin heard himself say. All eyes turned to him. "Is there?" Merrick asked. His lips twisted. "Speak, bookman, quickly." Herwin licked dry lips. "The Winter Pact still stands," he said. "The oath sworn at Winterfell, after the wall fell. They were not sworn only to a king in King's Landing. They were sworn between houses to each other, to stand when the realm needed all of them." Gaiman snorted. "Against ice ghosts," he said. "Those are dead. It's summer outside." Raelle's gaze sharpened. "The pact is written in the Great Book at Winterfell," she said slowly. My grandfather told me. It's why the North sends more men to the Watch than any crown edict could demand. Hey, Herwin said. You have read it? She shook her head. Only the summaries. Herwin took a breath. The pact can be invoked again, he said. Not only for winter from the north, for any winter. Famine, war. A realm on the brink of tearing itself apart. Merrick's eyes narrowed. You think this squabble is equal to the Cold Walking? No, Herwin said. But it might lead to something as bad. The last time your ancestor burned himself to lay the geas that made unity easier. It is still there. He gestured vaguely, as if at the air. I feel it when certain words are spoken. I saw it when the neck nearly broke. Men who wanted to turn away found it heavier than they expected. He shrugged. It is not compulsion, but it is guidance. Magic, Gaiman said, his lip curling. Old tales and fog. We have dragons. We have swords. We don't need children of the forest tricks. You have small dragons, Rael said quietly. And your sword cousin is no Valyrian blade. He flushed. Merrick wheezed laughter again. You're saying, he rasped to Herwin, that instead of crowning one and damning the other, I could name neither. I could call the realm to pact. Let them choose together. Herwin met his gaze. It would not be easy, he said. It would be noisy, messy. Harrenhal might collapse under the weight of all the lords. He allowed himself a thin smile. But the choice would be shared. The binding, as well. Harder to break something you've all woven. That invites chaos, Gaiman snapped. Every petty lordling will put his own arse forward. Better they shout in a hall than kill in the field, Merrick said. His breath rattled again. His hand clenched weakly on the blanket. He coughed, a horrible sound, and spat red into a cloth. Rael flinched. Daughter, Merrick said. Come close. She leaned in. His hand, still strong enough for this, caught the back of her neck and drew her down so his cracked lips were near her ear. Herwin looked away. Even so, he caught some of the words. Don't cling to it, Merrick whispered. If they choose you, good. If they don't, hold them to each other. Not to you. Nah. Her eyes shone. Yes, father, she whispered. He released her. His head lolled back on the pillow. Gaiman, he said. The prince stepped closer, uncertain despite himself. Merrick's gaze bored into him. If you love this realm, the dying king said, you will accept what's chosen, or you'll tear everything he built apart. He jerked his head vaguely toward the window, where the faint silhouette of the dragon pit loomed. You want glory? Earn it on the wall, not in my streets. Gaiman's mouth pressed into a thin line. I will always serve House Targaryen, he said. It was not quite the promise Merrick wanted. Merrick knew it. His eyes flicked briefly with weary amusement. Oh, of course you will, he murmured. Poor boy. His gaze turned to Herwin. Write it, he said. While I can still nod. Council, Winter Pact, Harrenhal. All the words that will make the G's hum and the lords squirm. His chest hitched. Let them feel him watching, Merrick whispered. Maybe they'll behave. Herwin bowed his head. As you command, your grace. It took 3 hours to draft the writ and have it sealed. By the time the last ribbon was tied, King Merrick Targaryen was dead. The ravens flew for days. From King's Landing, from Dragonstone, from Winterfell and Riverrun and Storm's End and Sunspear, birds black as spilled ink streamed outward. They carried copies of the same writ, written in careful hands and sealed with pale wax impressed by the Iron Throne seal on one side and the direwolf of Winterfell on the other. To all who hold title and land within the Seven Kingdoms, it began. Be it known that King Merrick of House Targaryen, second of his name, is dead. May the gods keep him. He before his death decreed that no crown shall be placed upon another brow until the great houses of the realm, in accordance with the pacts sworn in the shadow of the fallen wall, shall convene at Harrenhal to determine together the shape of the rule that is to follow. At Winterfell, Lord Edric Stark read the letter twice before speaking. He was a broad man with a Stark look, dark hair, gray eyes, a face made for weather, not court. He stood in the Godswood with the parchment in his hand, the words stark against his skin. "A council," he said. "Hey," said his sister Lyanna, a hard-eyed woman who had fought at the neck 20 years ago, and still wore mail when she thought no one important was looking. "Like the first pact, only this time it's not dead men we face, but living pride. The one often leads to the other," Edric said. He turned toward the heart tree. Its pale bark was knotted, its carved face watching with eyes red as blood. Snow clung to its branches, though the day was otherwise clear. The fused black glass was a rumor only this far south, but Edric had seen it once as a boy, on a ride with his father. A rippling band of glassy stone cutting the tundra, unmelting. He had stood upon it and felt something thrumming under his feet. Now, as he read the words aloud to the weirwood, he felt a faint echo of that hum. "In accordance with the pact sworn in the shadow of the fallen wall," he murmured. "They remember." "We remember," Lyanna said. "The South remembers when it pleases them." Edric smiled faintly. "Cynic. Die. Realist. Dot." He looked at the letter again. There were already whispers in the hall. Some said he should ride to Harrenhal with his banners and demand that the North be left to its own. The pact had been for winter, they said, and winter had passed. Let the South stew in its own squabbles again. Others argued the opposite, that the North must have a loud voice in deciding who wore the crown, if anyone. Edric felt pulled in both directions. In his dreams lately, he had walked on black glass. Sometimes he walked alone, sometimes with men from the South. When he tried to turn away, to walk back toward the warm halls of Winterfell, the air thickened, and his feet grew heavy. When he walked forward, toward distant flickers of blue and red flame, the going was easier. He did not speak of these dreams. Starks did not put much stock in dreaming, unless it came from a skinkanger's sleep. But when he woke, he always found his hand curled into a fist, as if gripping a sword. "What will you do?" Lyanna asked. Edric looked up at the heart tree, at its patient, knowing, inhuman eyes. What he would have done, he said. "Ride," Lyanna said. "Ride," Edric agreed. Harrenhal still bore scars from dragonfire centuries old. The stone had melted and run in places, forming strange, twisted flows that looked like frozen waves. Some towers leaned at odd angles, their cores seared and hollowed. Black streaks discolored the stone like old tears. The Great Hall, though, had been reinforced and refaced so many times that it was neither entirely new nor wholly old. High, soot-blackened beams arched overhead. Long windows let in strips of daylight that painted banners and shoulders in colors. When Lord Edric Stark entered, he felt the hum. It thrummed under his boots in the stone floor. It shivered in the air around the high table where a dragon banner and a direwolf hung side by side. The feeling was familiar now. It had come to him at the neck, at the last breaking of the dead, at Winterfell when he'd sworn his lord's vows. It was not a voice. It was simply weight. Certain choices felt heavier in its presence. Others felt light as quicksilver. This was a place of oaths. The stone remembered. He took his seat among the northern delegation. Beside him sat Lyanna, her hair coiled in a severe knot. Beyond her, the Mandrys in their sea green, the Karstarks in white, the Umbers looming like winter hills. Across the hall, he saw the others. The Lannister Lord, Lord Tygett, a lean, sharp-faced man with hair like beaten gold, sat with his kin, golden lions on crimson field behind him. The Tyrell heir, Willis, smiled as he spoke with a Martell princess in orange and red. The Arryn Lord was pale and thin as a reed, but his knights looked solid enough. The Baratheon had his boots up on the trestle until a glower from an aged Tully made him put them down. At the high table sat two figures. Princess Rhaelle Targaryen wore black and red, but there was more black than red, and no crown. Daemon sat near her, in red and black as well, but with a flashier cut, his hair carefully loose. Between and above them, on a slightly raised dais, the great chair of Harrenhal waited, empty. Beside the dais stood Maester Hywyn, stooped, his chain dull with years' handling. He looked older than Edric remembered from the Winter Council, but the eyes were the same. Edric took his seat, and the murmur in the hall gradually sank as others did the same. When the doors finally closed and the last of the latecomers, a sweating Stormlands knight smelling of horse, scuttled into place, Hywyn stepped forward. "In the name of King Merrick II," he said, his voice thin but carrying, "we call this council. By the Winter Pact sworn in the days of Prince Enar and Lord Brandon Stark, we gather to speak of the realm's safety, not for one crown only, but for all who live beneath its winters and summers." He unrolled a parchment. "The first matter, the question of succession. Princess Rhaelle of House Targaryen stands here, direct heir by blood. Prince Daemon of House Targaryen, her cousin, stands also, with claim by precedent of male primogeniture." "Precedent?" Daemon said hotly. "Precedent is only what men have done before," Rhaelle murmured. Too low for most, but not for Edric, whose ears had been trained on such tones. "Not law writ on the wall." Hywyn lifted a hand. "The king's writ did not name either as heir," he said. "By his own words, he called on you all to determine together the shape of rule that best suits this realm, in light of old threats and new." He stepped back. "The floor is open," he said, "and 7 help us all." There was a moment of stillness. Then it began. "By rights, the crown should fall to Prince Daemon," Lord Tygett Lannister said, rising smoothly. His voice was mellow, accustomed to being heard. "Kings have always preferred a son, or the nearest male in line. The 7 made men to rule and women to—" Lyanna snorted audibly. Edric kicked her under the table. She kicked him back harder. Tygett's gaze flicked toward the northern bench, cool and assessing, then returned to the high table. "Princess Rhaelle is doubtless a woman of many qualities," he went on. "But the lion learns early to put his mane on a lion, not a lioness. And the realm may be more easily held together by a king that looks like a king." He gestured subtly toward Daemon's bright head. "The last time the realm was asked to choose between a woman and a man with dragon blood," he added, "it nearly tore itself apart. Let us not invite another dance." "No." Edric felt the hum shift. Not loudly, not with obvious protest. Just a slight thickening, as if the air itself took note of something being said that might tear more than bind. Beside Rhaelle, Daemon's mouth curved. "House Lannister speaks with the wisdom of gold," he said, standing. "I had not meant to press my claim so baldly, but since we are here—" He spread his arms, as if in rueful surrender to necessity. "My cousin is wise, and I would gladly serve her, if the realm were more willing. But we do not live in a world of wishes. We live in the world Aegon made, and he did so with vision and with steel. I have both. I have a dragon, a little one," someone from the Stormlands muttered. Daemon did not falter. "And I have the will to do what must be done." Edric's fingers curled against the tablet top. He did not dislike Daemon exactly. The man had charm, too much of it even. He had ridden north once on a royal progress and taken an arrow in the shoulder for a winter town boy when a drunken quarrel had gotten out of hand. He was quick with a laugh, quicker with a jest at his own expense. But Edric had seen the way his eyes glinted when talk turned to glory. He rose. "The North remembers as ever that the crown sits on the head of whoever can keep the snows off the small folk," he said, his voice flat and carrying. "I don't care what's between their legs. I care whether they freeze and starve." A bark of humorless laughter came from the Umber's end of the bench. The Tyrells shifted, restless, glancing at one another. "Princess Rhaelle came to the wall in a blizzard," Edric went on. "She stood on the black glass and wind that cut men to the bone and listened when the watch spoke of their needs. She did not ride away when the weather cleared. She stayed a month. My men remember that. Rael's cheeks flushed faintly. She addresses us. Edric gestured to the assembled lords, in letters that do not drip with gold or gilt. Prince Gaemon addresses bards. A murmur went up, half amused, half disapproving. Gaemon's smile stiffened. You imply I've never faced the cold, he said, a thread of steel in his tone. I imply, Edric said, that when the last great cold came, my house stood under black banners for 7 years. The South remembers when it's convenient, Lord Tygett said. We remember when it isn't. The hum in the stone thickened. It was not approval for Edric. Not exactly. It was sharper, like the tension in a bowstring drawn too far. Words spoken here had weight. The pack tugged at them, trying to shape their fall. A lord from the Reach stood, his fine sleeves embroidered with berries and vines. What if neither? He said. Heads turned. What if we decide? He went on. That Targaryen blood has had its day. Dragons are small now. The wall has fallen and been held. The pact works as well as any crown. Why not choose a king? Or queen? From another house? One whose pride does not ride on old fires. One whose pride does not ride on old fire. Gasps. A hiss from some of the smaller banners. Rael's eyes widened, then narrowed. Rage flared up in Edric. He tamed it with effort. It was not because the Reachmen had spoken against Targaryens. It was because he had spoken against something deeper, the shared work of generations turned aside on a whim. The hum pressed, like a hand on the back of his neck. If they break it here, it will echo. Some part of him thought. The pact may not hold the next time winter really comes. He heard in memory Herwin's voice. You can resist it. You're stubborn enough. But it will be harder than it was before. Edric closed his eyes for a heartbeat. He saw snow on fused glass. He saw a man on a dragon disappearing into gray. When he opened them, he felt strangely clear. The pact was sworn between houses, he said, but it was anchored in a crown. Aegon's, Enara's. The idea that there is a point where all these lines meet. He gestured around the hall. Take that away, and the lines will fray. Old habits will climb out of their graves. You underestimate us, Lord Tygett said coolly. I know men, Edric said. And when men disagree without something to lean on, they reach for their swords. He looked at Rael. You have my voice, he said. And my sword if need be. Not for your blood alone. For the way you speak of the pact. Rael swallowed. She rose. This council was not called to pick between my cousin and myself as between stallions in a pen, she said. You are not choosing which horse to back in a race for your own wagers. You are choosing whether the work of the last 3 centuries, of my ancestors of yours, will stand or be carved into pieces because you prefer your own hall to your neighbors. Her gaze swept them. Lannister, Tyrell, Martell, Arryn, Tully, Stark, Baratheon. Aegon failed once, she said, not flinching from the word. A ripple ran through the hall at her boldness. He came blazing with dragons and letters that said kneel or burn. The realm met him and broke him. He hid on Dragonstone and bled himself into rock and fire to learn another way. Herwin's head lifted. Edric could see the shine in his eyes. My line has made mistakes, Rael went on. We have burned when we should have listened. We have listened when we should have cut. We have taken too much, and sometimes we have given too little. But the line itself, dragons and binders both, means something to this realm now. Tearing it out by the root will not unmake your hurts. It will only unmake the only symbol strong enough to make this pact hold in the hard years. Nani, and convenient for you, the Reachman muttered. Rael met his gaze. If this council chooses Prince Gaemon, she said, voice level, I will bend the knee. If it chooses another house, I will bend the knee. And then I will spend what life I have left making sure the Winter Pact is upheld by whoever sits that throne. Not because I am meek, because I have walked on black glass and heard stones hum. Her words rang in the air like struck metal. The hum swelled in answer. Edric saw hands twitch on table edges, eyes fill and harden and flicker. Men who had come here ready to bargain and bluff found the ground under them less certain. Gaiman stood very still. "You would give up your claim?" he said. "If this council decides another is better for the realm's unity," she said. "Yes." Edric watched his face. He saw greed there, saw hurt pride, saw as well the flicker of something else, shame perhaps. Gaiman's hand went to the pommel of his sword. It rested there, fingers tightening, then easing. "The dragon in me hates that," he said. There was a faint, crooked smile at his mouth. "The man in me knows you're right." He looked around the hall. "I will not pretend I don't want the throne," he said. "I do. I grew up hearing songs of my great forebears, and thinking I could be the one to add my own verse. But if taking it means tearing apart what they bled for, then the glory's not worth the ash." He took a breath. It trembled. "If you choose Rael," he said, "I will be her sword. If you choose another, I will be theirs, so long as they keep the pact." Lord Tyget's eyes widened a fraction. The Reachman looked between the two Targaryens, lips parted. The hum in the stone felt like a held breath finally released. In the end, it was not a clean victory. Some houses clung to the idea of a male heir. Others wanted anyone but a Targaryen. Still others saw advantage in backing what seemed likely to win. Arguments raged for days. Yet through it all, an odd pattern held. Whenever the talk turned toward fracturing the realm, to declarations of independence, to splitting off old kingdoms, the air in the hall grew tight. Men found their tongues heavy, their heads aching. Memories of nights on black glass, of distant howls, of their grandsires' stories pressed behind their eyes. When they spoke of arrangements that kept the lines between houses strong, even if they shifted the center, even if they curbed the power of the crown, the words came more easily. In the end, a compromise emerged. Rael would be queen. Gaiman would be named protector of the pact, a title with no precedent but great expectation. The Winter Pact itself would be written into royal law, its clauses binding on the crown as much as on any lord. The Great Council of Harrenhal would convene not only at a king's death, but whenever 2/3 of the great houses petitioned it, to hear matters that threaten the realm as a whole. "It is not the Seven making law," Herwin said wryly to Edric as they watched the ink dry on the charter. "But it will do. Until the next winter," Edric said. "Until the next winter," the old maester agreed. He died the following year, in his tower overlooking the north, ink on his hands. Queen Rael Targaryen's reign was not sung as loudly as sung. She fought no grand conquests. She did not ride a great dragon into battle, though she flew her little gray-green Vaiana to the wall twice, more for inspection than for spectacle. She did not wed a Prince of Dorne or a Lion of the West. She married a quiet second son of House Stark, binding ice and fire, not in the blaze of prophecy, but in the small, practical work of shared children. She spent more time with ledgers than lances. She argued with maesters and septons and wildling envoys in equal measure. She mediated a dozen border disputes that never made it into the songs. She made, in other words, a good, boring queen. Beneath the boredom, something new grew. The Great Council, called now and then not for succession alone, but for questions of grain distribution in hard years, for responses to plagues, for the renewal of the Watch's charter, became a habit. The idea that the great houses shared responsibility for the realm's survival took quiet root. There were rebellions still. There were bad kings and queens after Rael, and a few good ones, and many mediocre. There was one Targaryen half a century later who tried to roll back the winter laws and rule as if Aegon's fire had never cooled. His efforts failed. Not because some ghostly hand smote him, or because his dragons devoured him. His dragon was a sickly, stunted thing that died in its pit at 10 years. They failed because when he tried to levy ruinous taxes and ignore the pact's provisions, his own bannermen balked. He found to his astonishment and fury, that when he commanded the Manderless to seize extra grain from White Harbor's neighbors without repayment, the Manderleys refused. When he demanded the Starks send south more men than the agreed rota for a war he picked with a free city, the Starks invoked the charter and did not come. "You would defy your king," he shouted at Lord Benjen Stark across the council table. "I would uphold the pact my house swore," Benjen replied. "Which binds you as well, your grace." The king raged, stamped, threw goblets. He called banners and marched anyway with those who still obeyed. The war went badly. The free city in question hired mercenaries as numerous as ants and bought the loyalty of discontented lords with gold. In the end, he was forced not only to make peace but to come, hat in hand, to Harrenhal, where a council called by 2/3 of the great houses sat in judgment. He kept his crown, for the realm feared more chaos in removing him, but his wings were clipped. The charter was reaffirmed with amendments that made it harder to ignore. Maesters wrote dry commentaries. Septons preached confusing sermons about the proper balance of obedience and righteous resistance. Small folk grumbled less about who sat what throne and more about how much bread was in their ovens. Far to the north, beyond the fused scars that had faded a little but never quite gone, the land grew slowly over the old wounds. Grass poked up through cracked glass. Moss crept along the edges. Yet when shepherds or rangers or restless boys walked those lines, they still felt a tingle underfoot. When they dreamed, the dreams sometimes showed a black dragon over snow, or a man with silver hair standing on a field of ice, his hands outstretched. They did not know his name. They did not need to. In the citadel, long after Huron's bones had turned to dust, apprentices still copied his treatise. Archmaester Valen, whose ring and rod and mask were of black iron for the higher mysteries, kept a copy on a shelf near his own work. He would pull it down sometimes when overbold students spoke of dragons as if they were mere beasts, or of kings as if crowns alone moved the world. "Read," he would say, tossing the scroll at them. "Then tell me whether you think history is made by fire, or by what fire burns into stone." Most would come back with more questions than answers. 1. A sharp-eyed girl from the Fingers who wore her chain links in careful order returned once with a different proposal. "What if it's neither?" she said. "What if it's stories?" Valen arched a bushy brow. "Stories?" he said. "Explain." "Well," she said, flushing under his scrutiny, "the pact was words, oaths, no magic in them as such, or not obviously. But every time they're spoken, they're remembered, and the remembering makes men act differently. That's a story, isn't it? Repeated until it's heavier than just ink." Velen grunted. "You think you've said something new," he said. "You haven't, but you've said something true." He tapped Herwin's scroll. "Binder, they called him. This Aegon. Conqueror, father, monster, hero. All depending who held the quill. The realm is as much held together by the names we give our dead as by the laws we give our living." The girl looked out the narrow window, where the height hour rose like a pale finger against the sky. "Do you think he failed?" she asked quietly. "Really?" Velen considered. "He failed to do it all in one lifetime," he said. "He failed to make men better than they are. He failed to make kings wise forever." He smiled, faint and crooked. "But he succeeded in making it harder to forget that we stand or fall together. That may be the most anyone can do." The girl nodded slowly. She would later take the black iron ring herself and write a commentary on Horwin's work that would be argued over for another century. In some versions of that commentary, tucked between dry notes on wall thickness and dragon wingspan, she would include a small illustration in the margin. A man standing between a dragon and a wall of ice, his arms spread, his face turned not toward the threat, but toward the people behind him. No one knew quite why that doodle made apprentices shiver when they traced it. In a tavern in White Harbor on the eve of a mild winter, A sailor told a tale. He spoke of sailing near the shivering sea and glimpsing, far to the north, a shape in the clouds, something vast and dark that moved against the wind. He swore he'd heard a sound like a distant horn, though no ship had been near. "Oh, ghosts," the tavern keeper said, wiping a mug. "You saw a storm is all." "Storms don't cast shadows like that," the sailor insisted. At another table, an old woman with a face like dry leather chuckled. "You saw him," she said. "Who?" the sailor demanded. "The Dragon King," she said. "Not the one with the iron chair. The old one. The one who burned the wall and stitched us together like patches on a cloak." "Me," the sailor snorted. "Old wives' tales." "Hey," she said. "And old wives told you to salt your meat and mend your nets, and you listen to them, don't you? Some tales keep you alive?" A child at the next table leaned in. "Tell us, Nan," he said eagerly. "Tell us the one where he falls first." She smiled, showing gaps where teeth had once been. "He was a fool, your Dragon King," she said fondly. "Came flying in all fire and fury, thinking the world would bend just because he told it to. Got knocked out of the sky for his trouble. Lost his love. Hit on a rock and sulked and played with fire until it nearly burned him up. Me, Timsha." The child's eyes widened. "But he didn't stop there," she went on. "Oh no. He got up, took his dragons and his pride and went back again, slower this time. Listened, learned, made deals, got old and tired, and still he kept going. And when the real winter came, he flew higher than any man ever had, and he burned himself into the sky so bright that even now, when we think of breaking apart, we remember. Some part of us remembers." "No, remembers what?" the child whispered. "That we're all he left," she said. "Us. This muddled, quarrelsome, stubborn lot. His crown's just metal. His dragons are bones. But the way we hold hands when the cold wind blows, that's him. Still trying." Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. Inside, for a moment, the laughter and clatter dimmed as her listeners remembered stories their own grandparents had told. Of long winters, of black glass, of horns blown on walls, now gone. Then someone called for more ale, and the noise swelled again. The old woman sat back, listening. If she closed her eyes, she could almost hear, beneath the tavern din and the harbor cries and the distant crash of waves, another sound. A slow, deep beating, like the wings of something enormous far overhead. She smiled. "Still watching," she murmured. So soft, no one heard. Outside, the sky above White Harbor was empty. Yet somewhere in the long weave of the world's story, the place where what had been brushed against what might have been, a man with silver gold hair and a scar on his palm looked down not at crowns or thrones, but at the way men and women leaned toward one another when storms came. It was not the perfect unity he'd once imagined at a painted table. It was better. It was real. Ki-ah. The bells of King's Landing rang for no one. They clanged and tolled, discordant, as if the hands that pulled the ropes did not agree on what sound should be made. Mourning, warning, or prayer. From the high towers of the Great Sept to the lesser belfries over the fish market chapels, their noise washed over the city like rough water. In the Red Keep, Queen Mary's III, Targaryen listened with her jaw clenched. She stood at the window of the small council chamber, one hand braced on the stone sill, watching the smoke of 10,000 cook fires twist up over the city. Beyond it, the black water shone a greasy gray, sails like black fingernails scratching its surface. Another bell joined the din, higher and shriller. The sept of the Mother's Mercy, down by the Mudgate. She had come to know each bell by sound over the years. That one meant another bodyguard had reached its limit. "Your Grace," Lord Tybalt Hightower said softly behind her. "The maesters beg your leave to shut the citadel." "You already sent that raven," Mary said without turning. 3 days passed. "This is a further measure." His voice was calm, with that particular kind of serenity Old Town bred in men who lived under the Hightower's shadow. They would close their doors to all new supplicants, to preserve the knowledge that remains should the worst. The worst, Maurice said, is already here. She turned. The small council table had grown larger over the generations, extended and refashioned to accommodate more seats. It was cluttered now with cups, scrolls, and a great painted map of Westeros that had been brought in and unrolled so often the corners had frayed. Around it sat the Railman miniature. Lord Tybalt Hightower, tall and precise, his tower badge heavy on his chest. Lady Mara Tyrell, Willis' granddaughter, her gown a watered green that did not quite hide the sword calluses on her fingers. Lord Daemon Lannister, gold hair threaded with iron gray now, but eyes very bright. The master of ships from House Velaryon, a squat, thick-armed master of coin, haunted by numbers no one else could see. And at Mary's right hand, a spare, dark-haired man in simple wool and leather, who looked more like a house guard than a lord until you noticed the silver of his cloak clasp. A small running wolf. Lord Roderick Stark of Winterfell wore the Stark face, long, pale, and somber, with eyes that saw too much and said too little. The worst, Maurice repeated, moving away from the window, is here. It came on a ship from Lys, docked at Old Town 10 weeks ago. 2 men sick. 1 dead before dawn. 2 days later, a dozen fallen. A week after that, the bells in the city did not stop for 3 days together. She tapped the painted map where the Mander met the sea, and the little tower of Old Town was picked out in white and gold. Someone had inked a spreading stain of crimson there. The Red Fever, she said. So named by a poet, not a maester, because poets get to things quicker. It burns men from the inside out. They say the sick turn scarlet as if the heat were trying to boil through their skin. Poets, Lord Daemon murmured, have a fondness for dramatics. Mary's gaze snapped to him. Old Town's docks are empty, she said. The fires in their charnel house burn day and night. The septons of the Starry Sept are laying bodies in the streets because there is no room left in the crypts. Call it dramatic if it pleases you, my lord. Call it the Crimson Summer, or the Old Town Cough, or the Maiden's Scourge. Men are still dying. Daemon lifted a hand, conceding the rebuke with a small, courtly inclination of his head. I do not deny the sickness, your grace, he said smoothly. Only that we must be clear-eyed in our response. To seal every harbor along the southern shore, as the last proclamation commanded, is, he spread his hands, rings winking, another kind of death. Trade will resume when we are sure ships are not carrying plague as well as flour, Mary said. Our granaries in the west are full, Daemon said. If we cannot ship our surplus east, it rots, and our gold with it. We will not starve, perhaps, but we will suffer. Long memories grow from such suffering. The Hightowers asked for the closure, Tybalt said coolly. My own coffers bleed more than yours, Lannister, yet we do not complain. This is not a pestilence that can be bribed. The fever is worst in Old Town now, Mara said. Yesterday's ravens put cases in Old Town at 5,000. The day before, it was 4. The day before that, 3. We have crushed outbreaks in King's Landing and Gulltown by isolating streets. When we act fast, the fire dies before it can leap roofs. When we do not, she glanced to Roderick Stark. The North knows what happens when fire jumps hard ground. Roderick's face did not change, but his fingers drummed once on the table before stilling. When the long hull at Torrhen Square burned last year, he said, the flames caught the snow. We thought that would stop it. It did not. The thatch was wet, but a wind came, carried embers to the stables. We lost half the horses before the ice on the well melted enough to draw more water. What is your point, Lord Stark? Daemon asked. Roderick met his gaze without heat. Fire spreads in ways men do not expect, he said. It's better to waste a little water than a whole hall. Mary's let the words sit. In the silence, the distant bells tolling over the city seemed louder. We are not talking about one hall, Daemon said at last. We are talking about a realm. My ships are turned away from Old Town and King's Landing both. The Ironborn complain they have no one to raid but each other. The Manderly fleets rot in harbor. His jaw tightened. And we are to do nothing? Wait? On the promise that the fever will stop at some invisible line your maesters draw on a map. May. Yes, Mary said. The word fell into the room like a stone into a still pool. Daemon's lips thinned. On whose authority? On mine as queen, she said. And on the Winter Pact. The hum in the stone came then, low and steady. Mary's had grown up with it. The first time she'd felt it clearly, she had been 10, sitting in the gallery at Harrenhal while her grandmother Rael spoke at the council that bound the pact into law. Her legs had dangled over the stone, not reaching the floor, and she'd been more interested in counting lions and roses on the assembled cloaks than in listening. Then Lord Edric Stark had sworn his house to Rael, and the air had thickened. Not enough to stop her breath, just enough to make her sit up straighter. She felt it again now, older and sharper. She saw, in Roderick Stark's expressionless face, the same flicker of awareness. Daemon felt it too. She could tell by the way his eyes narrowed fractionally, as if some unseen hand had brushed the hairs at the back of his neck the wrong way. The pact, he repeated. Forged for ice demons and walking corpses. I see no whites in the streets, your grace. Only men coughing. And dying, Tybalt Hightower said. Winter, Mary said, is not only snow. It is any cold that bites us all. Herwin wrote that. You have read it, my lord? Daemon's mouth twisted. I have had it read to me. Then you know that when the wall fell, we faced something worse than an empty granary or a restive vassal, Mary said. The dead themselves. Not just from the north, but from the burned fields and the drowned coasts, rising to swell the ranks of those that marched. Aegon's last act bought us time. The pact we live under grew from that. It applies to more than blue-eyed monsters. Now, Her Grace is correct, Tybalt said. The fever does not care for banners. It has struck noble, merchant, and beggar alike. It has killed more maesters than any war in living memory. Yet wars end, Daemon said. Plagues burn themselves out, while the crown's decrees linger. Mary's patience frayed. When I was a girl, she said, I rode with my grandmother to the fused scars in the north. I stood on black glass where her great-uncle's dragonfire melted ice older than our histories. Do you know what it feels like? Uncomfortable, Daemon said. Hard underfoot. Mary stepped away from the table, the ring of her boot on stone sharp. It hums, she said. Not loudly. Not with the roar of dragons. A low note, like a harp string plucked and left to sing. When you speak vows there, the sound changes. When you speak threats, it changes again. Men who live near those lines dream different than men who don't. They dream of standing together and of falling apart, over and over, until the choice sticks like burrs in their minds. Nay. She looked at each of them in turn. That same note lives under Harrenhal, she said. And under Winterfell, and under King's Landing. Her hand fell lightly on the map, fingers resting where the Blackwater met the sea. Dismantling the pact would not be like cutting a rope. It would be like cutting nerves. We do not know what we would numb, or what reflexes would seize without the old balance. Silence. Then Roderick Stark spoke, slow and careful. Your Grace, he said. My grandsire told me that when he stood at the neck and watched the dead come on the ice, and heard the horns of the south answering Winterfell's, he felt something in his bones loosen, as if an old knot had finally shifted. Men who once would have turned aside came instead. They cursed it some. But they came. His hand tightened on the wolf clasp. If we choose now to say, this pact only applies when the threat looks like the old songs, we will be telling those stones they were mistaken, he said. I do not know what happens when you call a stone a liar, I would rather not find out. Damon's gaze went from Marais to Roderick, then to Tybalt, to Mara Tyrell, to the silent master of ships. There was calculation in his eyes. There always was. Under it, Marais saw something she had not expected. Tiredness. He was not a young man anymore. The gold in his hair was more memory than reality. His children squabbled over minor offices. He'd buried a wife and 2 brothers. The thought of breaking free from these binding oaths must sing to him like a siren. Yet he had grown to manhood under Rael's winter laws. He had ridden once with his father to the neck as a boy, and seen one of the fused scars. He had never set foot on it. His father had not dared bring a Lannister heir so close to something so strange, but he had seen the way the men who walked there came back changed in their eyes. He exhaled. "Very well," he said. "Let the pack stand. For this, at least." Marais felt the hum in the stone ease, as if someone had taken a boot off its neck. "Then," she said, "we will continue as ordered. No ships from Old Town without quarantine on the Blackwater. No cargo unloaded without inspection. We will send grain south by land where we can, guarded and spaced. We will not let hunger spread in place of fever." "Naiden. And if it reaches us anyway?" Lady Mara Tyrell asked quietly. "It already has," Marais said. "The bells outside say so. The question is not whether we can keep this fire from our own thatch. We cannot. The question is whether we let it leap from house to house until all of Westeros burns." She put both hands on the map, palms flat. "My ancestor bound his life to his dragon to give us time," she said. "We will not squander it because we fear an empty purse more than a full graveyard." In Old Town, the smell of burning flesh had become as familiar as salt. It rose in greasy waves from the pyres outside the city walls, where carts trundled day and night, leaving trails of blood and ash in the churned mud. The Hideour's beacon had burned green for years, but now its light seemed tinged with sickly red to every eye that turned toward it. Inside the citadel, Maester Alistair did not notice the smell anymore. He noticed the sound. The cough. It echoed up the stone stairwells, rasping and wet. It broke the tranquility of the libraries and the cool, echoing halls where acolytes once paced reciting names. It came from the dormitories, from the kitchens, from the infirmaries that had overflowed 3 weeks ago. A novice sneezed in the corridor as Alistair passed. He flinched. "Bless you," he said, because politeness was a habit deeper than fear. When the boy smiled weakly, he forced his own mouth into something like warmth. In his cell, he closed the door and leaned his forehead against it. He had served the citadel 40 years. He had seen plagues before. In a bad summer when he was still an acolyte, 3 sailors had brought the bloody flux up from Volantis. They had died within the week, and a dozen others had followed, bowels emptying themselves to death. The maesters had isolated the sufferers, boiled their clothes, burned their bedding, and the thing had run its course. This was different. The red fever did not care for water or walls. It ran hot through the body, setting cheeks aflame, eyes glassy, hearts racing until they burned themselves out. Some men were well in the morning and dead by nightfall. Others lingered, raving, sweating so much their beds were sodden, their hands clawing at their own skin as if trying to tear out the heat. Alistair had dissected a body that had died in the first days. The organs had looked as if someone had poured boiling oil through the veins. He crossed to his small table and sat. The sealed jar on its corner held a scrap of black glass. It was no ordinary obsidian. He had seen that volcanic glass before, brought from the smoking sea or the hills of Dorne. Those pieces were dull, greedy for light, heavy in the hand. This one seemed to hum. He had listened to Herwin's lectures as a young man, sitting in the back of the hall at the Citadel, while the old maester, already stooped, spoke of Aegon's last act. Herwin had never claimed certainty. He had reported tales of the fused scars with careful caveats. "Some say they feel nothing," Herwin had said, rubbing ink-stained fingers together. "Others swear to a vibration underfoot. It may be imagination. It may be something older than our measurements." The fact that we cannot measure it yet does not make it less real. Only less easy to prove to stubborn lords. No. Alester had not thought much of it then. When the fever came, the Hightower had sent riders north and east for all manner of remedies. One had returned from the Neck, from a Crannog man whose family had held to the old ways longer than most, with a heavy saddlebag slung over his horse. Fused glass, he had said, from where the great fire fell. Alester had taken a shard the size of his hand, smooth on one side, pitted on the other. He had set it on his table and gone about his work, half ready to laugh when it did nothing. When he came back to the cell hours later, exhausted and stinking of sweat and smoke, he had felt better. Not well. His muscles still ached, his mind still reeled. But the headache that had been growing behind his eyes, the faint fever he had been ignoring, had faded. He had thought it coincidence then. A trick of the mind, of expectation. Then one of the younger maesters had come in, complaining of a flush and shiver, asking if he could test his pulse. Alester, half distracted, had told him to sit on the stool by the table while he fetched a clean cloth. When he put fingers to the young man's wrist, the hammer beat he had expected was not there. The pulse raced, yes, but then slowed, gradually, like a horse easing from gallop to canter. The flush in the boy's cheeks faded while they spoke. At his next visit, Alester had had the boy sit near the glass again. The fever did not take him. It did take his roommate. The pattern repeated. Not every man who sat near the shard recovered. Not every man who did not sicken. There were too many variables. Alester's maester mind knew that. Yet each time he placed a feverish novice or a sweating fellow on the stool near the glass, the hum seemed to deepen, and the worst of the heat eased. He had no words for it. He had measurements, the slowing of pulse, the change in color of lips and tongue, the reduction in sweat. He had sketches of veins and arteries with little notes marking where he thought the fever struck hardest. No theory, only a hunch. And hunches were poor weapons against plague. He picked up the shard now, feeling the familiar tingle in his fingertips. Binder, he murmured. What did you do to this world? The glass did not answer. He thought of Aegon's last flight, of Balerion's fire and the wall shattering. He thought of the pact that had bound the great houses ever since, of the way certain choices had felt heavier to him, whenever he thought of breaking that pact in his own small way. What if the binding had not only tied men together? What if it had left patterns in more than stone? Fever was heat. Heat could be bled away, or trapped, or redirected. Irwin had written once, in a speculative margin Alester had found and copied, that the fused scars seemed to conduct not only warmth, but something else. The pattern of oath, he had called it, for lack of better terms. If heat followed pathways in the world laid down by Aegon's last sacrifice. Alester rose abruptly. He could not think this through in a cell. He needed wind and wet and a clear view of the Hightower, of the city beyond the walls. He wrapped the shard in cloth and slipped it into his sleeve. Outside, the citadel's courtyard was a blur of gray robes and white faces. Even in summer, Old Town's air was damp and cool, but it felt stifling now. Alester climbed the inner stair that led to the rookery tower. The air grew fresher with each turn. By the time he emerged onto the open walkway, the wind off the whispering sound hit him like a cool hand. Old Town lay spread below, streets like veins, squares like paled organs. Smoke rose from a dozen points, cook fires, forges, pyres. The starry seps domes glinted dully. Beyond the walls, the charnel grounds smoldered. The Hightower rose from its aisle like the spine of some great beast. Its beacon glowed green, the ancient dragonglass lenses focusing the ever-burning light. It, too, hummed faintly in his bones. He moved to the parapet and drew out the shard. It caught the light in a way he had not seen before. For a moment, the black glass glowed faintly red at its edges, then faded. Below, as if on cue, a bell rang harshly. He watched a cart move along the street toward one of the pyres. Men hunched, coughing beside the walls. A woman wiped her child's face with a rag. A group of Hightower guards pushed back a knot of desperate men, trying to force their way into the citadel's gates. The fever burned, indifferent. Heat flows along paths of least resistance, he said, half to himself, half to the shard. Cold, too. What if Oath does as well? He felt mad, saying it aloud. Yet madness and insight had always slept in the same bed. Aegon bound men together at the wall, he said. He poured all his fire into breaking ice and into tying blood. The scars that fire left seemed to draw certain forces. What if we could use the pact to guide this fever? Not stop it, perhaps, but divert the worst of it. Spread it even so that it burns less hot in any one place. He thought of arteries again, of clots and flow. If the fever was a clot of heat, perhaps the fused scars and the oaths could act as new veins, new channels. Absurd. And yet, he remembered suddenly something Herwin had said when he was very young. Magic, the old maester had mused, is often only intent written in elements instead of ink. Where you fix your will, the world bends, slightly. Not enough to make pigs fly. Enough to tilt the dice. 1,000 small tilts add up. No. If Marys could gather enough will in one place, enough oaths, enough acknowledgement of the pact's binding nature, could that intent be written into the fused scars? Could the fever be made to burn cooler, spread wider, kill less? It was not a cure, but it might be a path through. He looked at the shard in his hand, then at the green-lit tower, then at the distant line of the horizon beyond the city walls. The decision crystallized like frost. He turned toward the rookery. Ravens fluttered and muttered in their cages as he entered, feathers sleek, eyes bright. Alester strode to the biggest cage and picked out the largest raven, its beak sharp as a knife. It pecked his hand when he reached in. He took the bite, hissing, and tied the scrap of glass into the bird's leg leather. To the Red Keep, he told it, voice low. To the Queen. He wrote fast, the quill scratching. Accounts of the shard's effects, speculation on bindings, an unapologetically wild proposal. When he tied the rolled parchment to the raven's other leg, he hesitated only a moment before adding a single word at the end. Harrenhal. Then he opened the window and let it fly. The raven beat the fever to King's Landing by 3 days. By then, Marys had already strengthened the quarantines twice and ordered a new infirmary constructed outside the city walls, where the smoke from its pyres would blow out to sea. The bells rang more often. The royal septon's voice grew hoarser from prayers. When the bird arrived at the Red Keep's rookery, it fluttered in circles, refusing to land until the rookers whistled and clicked at it like scolding mothers. It pecked viciously as they untied its burdens, drawing blood. That's an ill-tempered bastard, one muttered, sucking his finger. Must have come from Old Town. The shard nearly fell from its leather. They found it by accident, clinking against the flagstones. Later, the rookers would claim that when they picked it up, they heard a faint sound like distant wings. In truth, all they heard was the clamor of the bells. They took the bit of glass and the letter to the Queen. Marys read Alester's cramped script twice, then a third time, more slowly. When she reached the last word, she exhaled. Harrenhal, she said. Roderick Stark, standing at the far end of the council table, looked up sharply. You mean to call a council again, he said. The winter laws allow it when 2/3 of the great houses petition. The Master of Laws objected. We do not have petitions. Then I will send for them, Marys said. Your Grace, Lord Daemon said, rubbing his brow. By the time lords gather at Harrenhal, debate, and ride home again, the fever may have run its course, or half the realm will be dead. Hells, I will argue with you across a table for a moon if you let me. But I would not leave my own halls empty while this thing stalks the roads. Manda. You think the pact's binding is superstition, Marys said. And yet you accepted it for quarantine. Now one of the Citadel's best says he can use that binding to Tilt the world, even a little. If he is right, we may cool this fire before it eats us. If he is wrong, we will still have the Winter Council's strength for what comes after." "What? What comes after?" Lady Mara asked. Mary's lips tightened. "Famine," she said. "Riots, men blaming each other for who lived and who died." She straightened. "Aegon bound his life to Balerion in secret," she said. "He did not seek the counsel of any but his sister. He paid a price few would pay. We live in a different age, bound by his work. If we are to ask the land for anything more, we should do it in the open, with shared voices." Roderick nodded once. "The Starks will ride," he said. Daemon sighed. "The Lannisters will come," he said. "I would prefer to haggle with you in person, your grace, than in raven scratches." Mara Tyrell's mouth curved. "Highgarden will send me," she said. "The fever has not yet reached our fields, but men cough more than they did. I will not wait until the roses are brown." "So be it," Mary said. "I will ride as well. If we mean to bind more, I should be there." "Your Grace," the master of ships protested, "you risk everything. If you die, then my daughter will inherit," Mary said. "As I inherited from my grandmother. If I cower on this hill while the realm gathers on another, the pact will feel thinner for it. The binding is blood, yes, but it is also presence." "Nay, Andia." She rolled the shard of fused glass between her fingers, feeling the faint, cool tingle. "Aegon's fire left scars in the world," she said. "It would be discourteous not to answer when they hum." Harrenhal had grown used to councils. Since Rael's day, it had hosted 3 great councils of the realm and a dozen lesser gatherings. Its twisted towers and vast drafty halls had seen more banners than any other castle in Westeros, save perhaps the Red Keep. Even so, when the Fever Council was called, men grumbled. "It's summer," they muttered as they packed cloaks. "Horses will sweat themselves thin on the road. Better to stay home, bar the gates, wait it out." Then they thought of red faces and bellies that did not rise again after a night of coughs, and they saddled anyway. The fused glass under Harrenhal hummed louder when the first of them arrived. Lord Roderick Stark came early, as his house always did, preferring to endure the southern heat rather than be beholden to southern hospitality on the road. He rode with a smaller company than his ancestors might have done, a concession to the fever, and brought with him his eldest daughter. Willa Stark had her father's face and her mother's laugh. She had grown up with snow in her hair and stories of black glass in her ears. As a child, she had dreamed often of walking narrow ridges where ice met stone, of hearing distant horns. When she told her father, he had only nodded, as if this were unremarkable. "Some of us dream that way," he'd said. "Your great-uncle could see through a hawk's eyes. I can feel storms coming in my bones." At Harrenhal, the dreams deepened. The first night, sleeping in a chamber whose floor still showed faint ripples where some ancient fire had half melted it, Willa dreamt of Aegon. She knew it was him, though she had never seen a picture that matched the man in her dream. He was younger than the statues, older than the tapestries, hair like silver melted into steel, face lined not with age but with weight. He stood at a table of light, not wood, his hands resting on it. Maps shifted there, not painted but flowing, continents rising and falling like breaths. Fires burned here and there. White patches spread, retreated, came again. "Which one will you choose?" he asked. His voice was not kind or unkind. Willa looked down. On the shifting surface she saw a plague bloom like spilled ink across the south. A red cloud spread from Old Town, staining the Reach, creeping toward King's Landing. Little flickers of resistance flared, green for herbs, blue for cold water, white for prayer. "None of these," Aegon said. "You cannot pour enough water on a forest if there is no river. You must change where the river flows." "How?" she asked. "I'm no dragon lord. I haven't fire in my veins." "None." He smiled, thinly. You carry something else, he said. Different, older perhaps. Your line has always listened. Listen now. He tapped the map. The red stain wavered, faintly. Beneath it, black lines appeared, branching. The fused scars, stretching from east to west, invisible to most maps. Oaths run along these, he said. And fear. And hope. They are channels in more than stone. You want the fever's heat not to burst organs like overfilled wineskins? He flicked his fingers and little circles along the red cloud. Cities, perhaps, or hearts, popped like blisters. Give it more room. Spread it thinner. Carry it along the old paths, so it cannot burrow so deep in any one place. That will sicken more, Willa said, horrified. Yes, he said. But kill fewer. This is the choice. Crops blighted in many fields or entirely dead in a few. She looked up at him. Shouldn't you be telling the queen this? She demanded. She's your blood. You're my work, he said. She woke with her heart pounding, the sheet damp against her skin. The second night, she dreamed of glass. It lay in the ground like rivers, like nerves, pulsing faintly with red light. When she stepped onto one, the hum climbed up her legs into her chest. She saw in flashes men gathered in halls across the realm arguing, swearing. Each vow sent a ripple through the glass. She woke with the taste of ash in her mouth. By the time the council formally opened, she felt as if she had walked half the length of Aegon's flight path in her sleep. The great hall was full again. Banners crowded the rafters. Lannister crimson and Tyrell green, Martell orange and Arryn blue, the sunburst of House Dane, the flayed man of Bolton, the Kraken of Greyjoy. The three-headed dragon of Targaryen hung highest, flanked by the direwolf and the trident. Queen Maryse sat beneath it. She wore no crown. Her hair was plaited simply, her gown plain black. Only the small brooch at her throat, dragon and wolf, twined, spoke of rank. Beside her stood her eldest daughter, Princess Ellyra, a thin, serious girl with hair like poured silver and eyes a shade darker than Mara's own. Ellyra's hands were ink-stained, Willa noticed, the nails bitten. At the queen's right, Daemon Lannister lounged with deceptive ease. At her left, Tybalt Hightower stood like a pale tower himself, his features composed, his eyes shadowed from journey and loss. Maester Allister, thinner than his letter had suggested, stood with Horwyn's old rod at his belt, as if he had borrowed the dead man's authority. When the murmur of voices had diminished to a low rumble, Maryse rose. My lords, my ladies, she said, we have come together before for crowns. Today we meet for breath. No, they. Bah. She gestured to Alester. Speak. The maester stepped forward. He described the fever, the way it burned, the way it seemed to ignore some men and devour others. He spoke of observations and careful notes, of pulses and temperatures, and little incremental improvements from cold cloths and willow bark. Then he spoke of the shard. There was scoffing at first when he mentioned fused glass. A few lords exchanged glances that said, wordlessly, old wives' tales. When he described the slowing of heartbeats in those who sat near it, the muttering deepened. You propose, a lean Dornish lord said, to cure a plague with rocks. I propose to try to guide it, Alester said, not flinching. We have no cure. The fever runs its course regardless, but we may choose how hot that course burns. He laid the shard on the table. The hum in the room shifted. More than one man stiffened. It is like the fused scars in the north, Alester said. I held it near a boy on the cusp of the fever's worst. I felt this hum. His pulse slowed. I have repeated the test cautiously with the same effect. Not always. Not with equal strength. I suspect, his fingers flexed. I suspect that the binding on these stones responds to intent, to oaths, to the weight of will. One man, one maester, cannot lay enough weight. He looked up at them all. Many can, he said. Tyrell's lady frowned. You speak of Mass prayer? I speak of mass decision, Alistair said. At Old Town, the fever's heat may have hooked on some of these old channels. The fused scars are far, but the Hightower stands on strange stone. If we agree here, all of us, to allow this binding to turn some of the fever's heat away from deep organs and into shallower veins, the Geas may carry that intent along the scars. None? Turning men uniform scarlet sounds worse than losing some, someone muttered. It will still kill, Alistair said bluntly. I will not soften that, but I believe, no, I feel that it will kill fewer. Magic, Lord Tygett Lannister said dryly, has a famous habit of doing what it wants, not what we intend. Which is why, Marys said, we will not let only one man's intent decide. We will bind it with ours. Done. Daemon's gaze was sharp. You would tie us deeper to this pact, he said. Not only for wars and winters, but for fleas and fevers. Marys inclined her head. The pact is already woven into our law. This would only acknowledge what is there. That when the realm faces a common abuse, we stand together, not apart. Abuse? A Riverlord echoed. You speak of the fever as if it were an enemy lord. It marches like one, Roderick Stark said. It breaks walls, takes halls, leaves bones. Willa watched Ellyra. The princess had not yet spoken, yet when she lifted a hand now, the hall quieted. I read Horwyn, she said. Her voice was clear without the quaver of youth. His chapter on the binder, not only the conqueror. He wrote that Aegon's last act did not dictate our choices. It only bent them, slightly. We still decide. Every time we hold to the pact, the bending grows. Every time we break it, it cracks. She looked at the shard on the table. You fear giving this fever a path, she said. So do I, but it has a path already. Through veins, through ships, through every shared cup. The only choice is whether we pretend it's not our concern, or we choose how we share it. Nuh, the undamned. Share it, the Dornish lord said, distasteful. A fine thing to be told I must share a plague. You share winter, Ellyra said. You share drought, when the rains fail in the reach, and your oranges shrivel. You share the wall, though it is far from Dorne. This is no different. The binder did not spend himself only for snows he could see. The hum deepened. Willa felt it in her teeth. She stood, heads turned, surprised. The girl from the north, scarcely of age, dressed in plain wool with only a silver direwolf on her throat. Not a great lord. Not a queen. A wolf cub amidst dragons and lions. Her dreams pulsed behind her eyes. When my grandfather rode to the neck, she said, he spoke of hearing music, not with his ears. In his bones, he said oaths taken there felt heavier. Not like something forced, like something remembered. She nodded toward the shard. I felt it too. Here, in this hall. It makes certain words harder to say, others easier. She met Daemon Lannister's gaze. Tell me truly, my lord, she said. When you thought of closing your harbors only to Old Town, did your tongue feel thick? He stared at her a heartbeat longer than necessary. It did, he said. Murmurs. A feeling, Tygett said. Not law. Feeling is where law begins, Willa said. Aegon didn't carve his binding into stone with a chisel. He poured himself through a dragon's heart and let the world catch the shape. We live in that shape. She spread her hands. I don't pretend to understand what Maester Alistair proposes, she said. But I know this. If we stand here and choose only for ourselves, it will chafe. For generations. Stones remember. So do children. She thought of her dream map, of red clouds and black lines. If we choose instead to carry some of this heat together, she said. Then when our grandchildren walk on fused glass, they will not hear it crack. The lord from Dorne snorted softly, but his eyes were thoughtful. "What do you propose, then?" he asked. "That we cut our arms and drip blood on that rock? Sing songs?" "Close enough," Mary said. She stepped down from the dais, moving to the table where the shard lay. "We will renew the pact," she said. "Not in words alone, in intent. Each house here will swear not only to aid one another in winter and war, but to accept measures that share this fever's burden. Quarantines, supply pools, the rotation of healthy men into sick towns, and sick men into healthier air, where space allows. We will swear to make our maesters work easier, not harder." She looked to Alester. "And you," she said, "will carry this shard back to Old Town. You will set it in the Hightower's heart. The same glass that focuses their beacon can focus this, yes?" He bowed low. "I believe so, Your Grace." "Then do it," she said. "When we swear, we will do so knowing that something in the bones of this land hears us, whether you call it magic, or binder's folly, or God's humor." She picked up the shard. The hum leapt. Willa felt it in her chest, under her ribs, where her heart beat. For an instant, the hall fell away. She saw the fused scars, glowing faintly in the earth. She saw the Hightower, its beacon turning from green to a strange, cool red that did not burn but bathe. She saw men in Old Town coughing, then breathing a little easier. She saw the fever moving, slower, along lines that were broader now. She saw Aegon at his map of light, watching, saying nothing. Then the hall rushed back. "Who stands for this?" Marys asked quietly. Lord Roderick Stark came forward first, as his house always had. He laid his hand on the shard beside the Queen's, his bigger, scarred hand dwarfing hers. "Winterfell stands," he said. "We have long shared our cold. We will share this heat." "Aye." The hum climbed. Lady Mara Tyrell followed, slender fingers pale against the dark glass. "Highgarden stands," she said. "We will not hoard our green." Tybalt Hightower's hand was steady, though his eyes shone. "Old Town stands," he said. "We will not shut our tower to something older than we are." One by one the others came. Lannister Gold, Martell Sun.K, Aaron Falcon, Manderley Merman, Dane Sword, Greyjoy Kraken, Tully Trout. Some hands shook. Some did not. Each touch deepened the note. Willa went with her father. They laid their hands together. When Daemon Lannister's turn came, he lingered a heartbeat before touching the shard. He had thought, earlier, of asking for concessions. Trade routes, tax relief, the acknowledgement of special rights. Bargains. Habits old as Lannisport. He thought now of the weight on his chest when he pictured turning his ships away from any port but his own. Of the thick-tongued feeling he'd had at the council table. "Casterly Rock stands," he said. He felt something ease. When it was done, when the last lord stepped back, the shard on the table glowed faintly, only for a heartbeat. Only enough for eyes to widen, for a collective gasp to suck in, then out. Then it was once more only black glass. Only heavier. Alester took it with hands that trembled, and bowed so low his chain brushed the stone. "I will set it," he said, "and light what fires I can around it." In Old Town the fever did not vanish. Men still coughed blood. Women still burned with red heat. The pyres still smoked. But something changed. Those who fell ill near the Hightower, whose beds were lined in stones brought up from the fused scars and shards cut from the shard itself, carefully, reverently, as if dividing a relic, found their fevers breaking not in 3 days, but in 1. The worst flush faded from their skin. They recovered weaker, thinner, but alive. The disease spread north and east as Alester had said. Small clusters in Fairmarket, a flare in Gulltown, a scorched village in the Dornish marches. Yet none of those outbreaks burned as hot as Old Town's first fire. The fever became a background blaze, always there, always dangerous, but less likely to leap and devour whole streets. It took the old and the very young more often now, as plagues usually do, rather than cutting down men in their prime without pattern. The measures sworn at Harrenhal helped. Lords who might have hidden cases for fear of stigma instead sent ravens. Maesters who might have hoarded herbs shared. The pact's hum nipped at selfish instincts, making them sit more ill on the tongue. There were still cowards. There were still fools. One minor house near the arbor tried to lock their sick servants in a cellar and deny the fever's presence rather than lose trade. Half the hall died when it seeped through the cracks. But the whole realm did not burn. Over the next year, the bells rang less often. Men in Old Town began cautiously to open their shutters again. The Hideour's fires burned green once more, though now and then, in certain lights, the glow seemed tinged with cool red. In King's Landing, the bells of the Mother's Mercy rang again. This time, it was for Thanksgiving. In Winterfell's Godswood, Willa Stark knelt in the snow beneath the red leaves and pressed her palm to the cold ground. She could feel the fused glass far below, humming. "Thank you," she murmured. She did not know if she spoke to the old gods, to Aegon, to the long-dead children of the forest, to the stones themselves. It did not matter. The thanks flowed along the scars either way. Years later, when men spoke of Queen Mary's, they called her the Winter Queen, though the worst of her reign's crisis had been a summer fever. They wrote of her in ledgers and chronicles as a woman who built granaries and infirmaries, who expanded the winter laws to include sickness and flood as well as snow and sword. They noted, dryly, the way trade suffered for a few lean years and then rebounded stronger, built on new routes and expectations. They did not agree on whether the Shard Alester set in the High Tower had truly glowed, or whether that was a fancy added by storytellers. They did note that after the fever it became slightly easier to convince stubborn lords to share burden in times of common distress. Maesters chalked it up to memory. Old women in taverns told children that the binder had turned in his sleep and pressed his hand a little more firmly on Westeros' back. In the Citadel, Archmaester Sorella, the girl from the fingers grown old and severe, with a chain as thick as her patience was thin, added a codicil to Horwyn's treatise. In the days of Queen Mary's III, she wrote, "It is recorded that a second binding occurred at Harrenhal, this one in full sight of the realm. Whether one attributes the subsequent moderation of the red fever to maesterly skill, to chance, or to the reinforcement of Aegon's earlier work, is a matter of belief. I observe only that the pact, when invoked with intent and humility, appears to have effects beyond the merely political." She chewed her quill a moment, then added, in a smaller hand, "It may be that the true conquest is ongoing. Not of land by fire, but of folly by repeated stubborn choice." Far to the north, on nights when the aurora danced green and purple above the shattered remnants of the wall, some said they saw, just for a heartbeat, a shadow like a great dragon pass across the stars. Others said that was nonsense. Yet when the cold winds blew hard, and the horns of Winterfell rang thrice for threat, whether that threat wore ice, fire, or fever, men still felt a hum in their bones that made it a little easier to ride toward each other instead of away. That hum was Aegon's true legacy. Through failed battles and long councils, through dragons dying and plagues burning, through winters of snow and summers of sickness, it bound Westeros not into a perfect whole, but into something much rarer. A realm that, when given the chance to fall apart, again and again chose, by inches, by arguments, by oaths spoken with thick tongues and reluctant hands, to hold.